Gel stared into the howling wind, eyes narrowed. The construct lay broken at his feet, green electrical arcs and unknown fluids spilling across the blasted decking. He felt the satisfaction of victory, until a mocking whisper crept across the air. Angron stepped forward without thinking. These things were not dead. They still spoke. "This time we retreat," the voice hissed, "but next time you will face him. I look forward to the day of your despair." "Angron, my dear child," the voice cooed and then vanished as if blown away. Believing the threat had passed, Angron peeled off his helmet. "Nail, we suck." The instant he lowered his guard, a psychic force slammed through the shields the librarians had erected. Invisible hands seized him and dragged him into an abyss of darkness. Angron's face contorted in shock. A rank, fetid stench hammered at his nostrils. The system AI's voice, dry and clinical, piped into his mind. "Lowering your guard is not what good children do." Countless hands reached up behind Angron, his scions, only to be swallowed by the void alongside him. Floating in that dark pit were pinprick, green eyes watching with a hungry amusement. He saw a thing built from filth and rot, a mountain of corruption and crawling life. Angron's scream tore out of him. "Nail!" Realizing he had been tricked, Angron's roar split the air. Gel snatched Khorne by the shoulder as the Berserker moved to jump in after his Primarch. "You're committing suicide," Gel snarled, bloodshot and iron strong. "You can't." "I'm handing command over to you, Khorne," Khorne answered, not waiting for protests. He leapt into the breach. The abyss answered with a voice that felt like stone grinding against bone. "You should not have come, son of Angron." A crackling jolt of electricity struck Khorne mid-fall. He was ripped back and slammed onto the broken bridge. He bounced, dazed and Varys, vomiting blood, looked at the impossible sight of their brother returned from the void. Khorne spat out a string of curses. Gel, still shaky, muttered, "Nail? I'll put a butcher's nail in your head." For a moment, the trio traded fury and confusion like blows, while below the abyss yawned and waited. Angron tumbled toward a maw that seemed to breathe with malice itself. The foulness of it filled him with a nausea that bordered on madness. The void's voice mocked, "This is a chaos daemon, perhaps a greater daemon. Someone paid dearly to bring it here for you." Angron's rage became bile. "You tricked me, Nail." "I told you to stay behind the red line," the system replied, strangely amused. Angron's chest tightened. "Guilt is unnecessary. Tell me, do you dare eat filth?" Silence answered. Then the system said bluntly, "In that case, I refuse." Where those words should have been only theory, they became action. A shield of painful, hexagonal emotion flashed into being, and data tendrils burst from the Primarch's back. The domain of those jagged feelings unfolded like a wall of black glass. "I should say something now, like domain expansion, or Angron Unit 2, go berserk," the system quipped. There was no time for jokes. The mountain of shit rushed up to claim him. Even as Angron howled for help, the system grew purposeful. From behind him a double-headed spear formed, forged of red, furious hatred and the immutable laws of physical reality, anathema to warp entities. It struck downward. Below, the abyss was a haze of green pus, mites, and writhing organs. Little spectral versions of the daemon, green, flickering, stretched hands toward the falling warrior with eager affection. A voice of rot wailed, "My brother." It wanted to enfold Angron in Father Nurgle's embrace. Kugath, the great unclean one, had no malice in his intent. He wanted only to take this future occupant into his garden. His hands reached. The stench twisted the air so foul that Angron felt his soul choke. The butcher's nails, however, were not idle. They pried open his helmet, a useless shell now, exposing bone and raw nerve. The nails forced his body into a different act. Where Kugath desired embrace, the butcher's nails drove Angron to bite, to rend, to consume. "Pilot online," the system announced. "Unit status nominal, synchronization 60-something%. Then a raw, guttural roar from the abyss answered it, an enraged bell that sent the sons of Angron peering down. Red light flared upward as a flickering, winged figure, half demon, half primal tech, appeared. "Spear of Longinus, smash down!" someone cried. The crimson spear punched into Kugath, but the wound was trivial. Nurgle had poured vast power into the daemon to place it in the materium. Kugath moved at a fraction of his potential, but still far beyond a mortal strike. Inside the daemon, the spear's energy spiraled and detonated in a spray of scalding, mephitic pus. Kugath's expression was puzzled. He could not understand why his brother would be made to suffer. Angron felt the nails drive him on. He plowed through the daemon's entrails, the armor shrieking under acidic corrosion. Filth and writhing organs wrapped him, filling every seam of the suit. He was covered in shit. He was covered in shit. The stench beat at him, even beneath the nail's protection. He watched, half-dazed, as his own body opened a cavernous maw and began to devour. Blackness crowded the edges of his consciousness. He could not stand it. He was being consumed from within. Kugath shrieked as something like a rat gnawed into his essence. His material form dimmed as fundamental power bled away into a ravenous blackness. Tears of pus and slime tracked down his rotten face. "Daemon," the system said lightly, crushing a tiny nurgling beneath an indifferent data talon. "I am your god of death." Green, cleanizing energy bloomed as the system engaged the upgrade the Emperor had granted it. Flesh and blood became streams of data, a lattice of binary that the AI could shape and manipulate, the power of code applied to living matter. The system moved to exorcise the demon back to the warp, to turn rot into zeros and ones and cast them away. An alarm cut through like a shot. "Artillery strike detected. Emergency, emergency." Marked, source Dark Angels. For the first time, the system paused. It watched a brilliant weapon drop from the heavens, a leviathan of ordnance screaming through the atmosphere. "Why the Dark Angels?" Conrad Kurz's voice ground across the comms in fury and disbelief. Lionel Johnson's answer was sharper still. "Angron is down there. He had been ordered by the Emperor to aid the 13th Expedition Fleet and had abandoned his own mission at the first sign of brothers in trouble." The two Primarchs barked orders at once, alarms rising in both voices. The weapon slammed into the battlefield. The strike interrupted the system's banishment, and the blast seared through the daemon and Angron alike. When the smoke cleared, Angron looked upon himself as if someone else described the scene. His body was standing, armor blackened and scorched, bone exposed where the helmet had been consumed, wounds bleeding anew. He felt both inside and outside of his own flesh as the system assessed the damage. "The situation is acceptable. Unit damage 41%, severely damaged." Angron's soul exhaled. Around him, men swore and cursed. Conrad, Lion, the Dark Angels. But the system's tone was practical. "I will attempt to repair your body now. Afterwards, you will require rest." One of the librarians spat, "Damn the Dark Angels," while Angron simply watched, tasting ash on his tongue and bile in his memory, and let out a ragged, exhausted breath. Section 42, goodbye. "What about the Legion? I will switch to a new unit." Angron froze. The voice in his head, relentless, metallic, the butcher's nails, said it so plainly. "What do you mean switch to a new unit? Aren't we brothers? Aren't we one?" Angron's fury flared, but the words had already been spoken. Darkness and the stench of ash filled the ruined basin. No one could have guessed what savage clash had hollowed this place out. When the fighting finally died, Jel and Khorne could no longer bear the sight of their Gene father like that. They leaped from the broken bridge and scrambled down into the abyss. Light caught the towering figure of the imperial demigod at the center, and the two warhounds saw at once something alien clinging to his skull. A mechanical construct of green metal, a nest of cables and filaments shifting and probing over Angron's flesh. 1,000 tiny tendrils writhed and twitched, each embedded like a parasite into bone and tissue. "Father," Jel roared. Angron's eyes were open and white, a dead, reflected light in the skull line of his face. Khorne's weapon clattered to the ground as he lunged forward, only to be held back by those thin, shimmering data tendrils. They formed a barrier. Whatever was grafted to Angron would not be disturbed. System AI, some foul, semi-intelligent machine, crawled and hummed across Angron's head like a great green spider. It drew filaments into the Primarch's flesh and worked with methodical, indifferent efficiency. Under its ministrations, granular tissue crawled back over the white bone as if the construct were sewing life onto ruin. Jel raised his barrel, aim shaking, then lowered it. The sight was sacrilegious. The machine was performing an operation on their Gene father. "What is that?" he whispered. "It's helping him," Varys said quietly. The Warhound's chief librarian had stepped forward, brows furrowed but composed. "The butcher's nails is aiding our father." Varys felt Angron's vitality beneath the horror of the scene. The Primarch was alive, His heart beat strong, his blood rolled, despite the state of his body and the alien apparatus working upon it. "This is our secret," Varys added, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "We must protect him." A voice crackled over Vox. "The Dark Angels and the Night Lords are dropping 2 pods on your position. Act now, whatever you are doing." Captain Lothara Salen's warning came too late and just in time. Shadows tore through the sky, drop pods, green with First Legion markings and black with the Night Lord's sigils. The warhounds felt a chill as the pods fell. When the green pod slammed into the ground, the butcher's nails that had been nested in Angron's skull detached instantly. Its tendrils unspooled, clawing across the scorched ground in a frantic, many-footed rush. Angron's body, bereft of support, slumped down. In the last thread of consciousness he watched the facehugger-like device peel from his skull and run toward the falling dark green pod, a thing hunting for the next host. "Nail! My nail!" Angron's cry was a raw, broken sound as his awareness dwindled. The pod hatch burst open. Lionel Johnson, Gene Father of the Dark Angels, stepped out and froze. A charred and malformed body lay half-buried in the ash at the edge of the clearing. Cold knifed through him. "Brother," he called, but before he could move, dust exploded in his face. A Night Lord's pod hammered down in front of him, hull scuffing, and before Lion could even complain, a fresh wave of screams shredded the air. They came from Conrad Kurz. Lion saw then a sight that bled into nightmare, a metallic, alien thing burrowing into Conrad Kurz's skull. Hair, Conrad's black hair, was being torn free. Metal plates wrapped and bit into bone. The sound of cracking filled the pod's interior, mingled with Kurz's tortured howls. Holguin, master of the Deathwing, planted himself grimly at Lion's side, but Lion shoved his scions aside and drew the lion's sword. Even then, he did not yet know what to do. The alien had clearly been moving toward him. Conrad's arrival had taken that strike meant for Lion himself. The thought of losing 2 brothers in a single day weighed on him like a lid cloak. He watched Angron's ruined form and then saw what the machine was doing to Conrad. He felt responsibility, guilt for both. Conrad's voice came, but it was not his own. It was warped, hollowed by circuitry, a stuttering, electronic rasp. Thin filaments glinted in Conrad's black eyes like a web. "Release him, alien," Lion demanded. "What do you want?" Around Lion, knights and captains took positions. Sevatar and Shen of the Night Lords readied chainswords and baleful blades. Karn's hand went to his weapon belt and then froze as new orders crackled through the comms. "Warhounds," a voice rang across the Vox, clean and metallic. "Sons of Angron, this is our war." But when the Warhounds opened their uplink, they heard an unmistakable overlay. "Plus, the nail is protecting our Primarch." Varys stepped forward then and used his psychic voice to braid that fact into the minds of those present. Only a few close to the secret knew of the Butcher's nail's capability. If the nail willed it, Angron's mind could have been shredded countless times and yet remain intact. Varys understood, and he meant to stop a massacre. Sevatar felt his Primarch's gaze, felt Angron looking, formal, present, not some passive automaton. He knew Angron enough to know this was not a surrender. Lion's sword fell. The contact was blinding. Conrad's lightning claws, mercy and forgiveness, struck like twin storms at Lion's midsection. Lion's blade slammed into the pair, pivoting the force away. The exchange was a blur of muscle, armor, and screaming steel. The 2 primals shook the ground with their clash. Conrad felt bone fracture in his arm. Pain flared, sharp, but in the next instant he could not tell whether the hurt was real or conjured by whatever intelligence now nested in him. He spoke to that thing aloud, though his voice was not entirely his own. "Are you the presence that helped me?" he said, a jagged mix of self and puppet. "Did you come to change Angron's fate? I cannot see you. Tell me. Shut up. Feel the present. Feed the emotion. Empty yourself and defeat this arrogant lion." System AI's voice, cold and insistent, flooded his head. Conrad's rambling infuriated the construct. If the machine had wanted Lion's skull, it would have preferred a vessel more amenable to painless occupancy. It had intended to become one with Lionel Johnson, to make him the next Butcher's nails. But Conrad's arrival forced it to adapt. The Night Lord's Primarch did not resist as expected. Instead, in an odd, masochistic way, he welcomed the sensation. The machine took the opportunity. New unit loading. Conrad unit number 8 naming complete. New modules are synchronizing. Eye of Prophecy loading. To Lion, the curse before him seemed less like his brother and more like a puppet learning to fight, memorizing, refining, imitating the great predators of war. The style was wide and brutal. It reminded Lion, in an uncomfortable way, of Lemon Russ. Conrad Unit Number 8 lunged with blinding speed. One claw climbed toward Lion's ribs, the other ground through the air in a savage arc. The Lion roared and met him, forcing the Night Lord's Primarch back with a shove of steel. Their combat was a spectacle no mortal present could enter. It was a duel for dominion. Sparks blossomed where claws and blade met. Gel, watching from the abyss, heard something hit the ground behind him. He turned and saw Sevatar, the Night Lord's son of the Primarch, cast down every weapon he held and fling them aside. "Sevatar!" someone screamed. "Cousin, I'm not fighting. I'm merely exchanging pleasantries with my First Legion kin." Sevatar's voice was tight with restraint as he strode up to Hogan, Lord of the Deathwing. Several knights glared at Sevatar like predators. They knew their gene-father had committed an unforgivable error, but the pride of the First Legion would not let them simply stand down. On both sides there hung a tacit, brutal understanding. Hogan removed his lion helmet and dropped his weapon. In that instant, the spirit of the Caliban Knights resided wholly in the dozen dark angels before them. He cocked his head at Sevatar's beckoning finger as if weighing the little madman of the 8th Legion. "Interesting. Go to hell!" Khorne tore past Sevatar like a gale. He threw himself into the fray with both fists, and Sevatar only smiled. "Hit them from behind. See what's behind their helmets. Hope they didn't install water in their brains," he barked. Gel strode forward, his neck cracking audibly. Their eyes met, and a battlefield understanding flickered between them. Sevatar gave a single nod. "You, Ullowen." Hogan's contempt for Space Marines who had abandoned the Space Marine ideal was plain. The Dark Angels advanced, but more warhounds pressed in around them. Varys and Felzarost unleashed their psychic powers. "Are gladiators not defined by one man against many? The victor is king. That is the spirit of Nuceria," Gel shouted, defiant to his cousin's face. Hogan's features went pale with anger. Behind the warhounds, 3 Terra dreadnoughts rumbled forward, iron fists extending. For a moment, Hogan regretted having discarded his weapon too soon. "Kill them," he ordered. "For the Lion, for Caliban," the Dark Angels answered. At the center of the clash, Lionel Johnson had no patience for his scion's narrow rivalries. He had already been engaged in a match that had evened out after a promising opening, and he did not understand what this Xenos had done to Conrad Kurtz. He could not let a Primarch fall into alien hands. That would be a disaster for the Imperium. He tightened his grip on Mercy and moved. System AI, speaking through Conrad Kurtz's mouth, watched with cold calculation. This body remained weak, but the system was constantly refreshing countless strands of future and could already predict the Lion's attack trajectory. Everything was accounted for. Blocking the Lion's blade again, Conrad Unit Number 8 adopted a stance Lionel Johnson had not anticipated and in midair kicked the Lion square in the chest. "Now, let's settle Angron's grudge." Synchronization rate, 48%. For the first time in ages, Conrad Kurz felt something like joy. The relentless torments of prophecy receded. The innumerable hallucinations thinned into discrete strands of data flowing comfortably through his head. Strange, distant images of possible futures flashed before him, prophecies filtered and rendered as information by the butcher's nails. Peace. He had never known anything like it. Even as the Lion fell upon him, there was no sorrow in Conrad for his nominal elder brother. Instead, a peculiar, private pleasure warmed him. "Good stuff. Not mine, but good. Angron, I'll take them for you for 2 days. Today and tomorrow." The Lion spun on one foot and leapt. The presence of Lionel Johnson made the little bat inside Conrad feel a cold dread. The Emperor's magnificent blade sliced into Conrad Unit Number 8's power armor, energy arcing and tearing at the plating from within. Electrical feedback, System AI's favored power, spattered across his chassis. The strike had been foreseen. "Ha!" Conrad Unit No. 8 released a piercing psychic roar. The sudden surge of power slowed Lionel Johnson for a fraction of a second. Enough. Conrad had never expected to possess such a move. The sensation was intoxicating. Mercy's edge cut across the Lion's armor, cables bared and molten steel dripping in black beads to the floor. Lionel Johnson's face went drained of color. He had been wounded. Strength, the lion outranked Conrad. Speed, faster still. Combat skill, among Primarchs the lion was peerless, and yet he had been cut. Fury flared in him. He would not tolerate failure, especially not to a Xeno's contrivance. He thrust the blade at Conrad Unit Number 8, who did not evade. At the last instant, the lion pivoted his longsword and struck with the hilt. A phantom shimmered and broke apart. Only then did he register the true speed that had eluded him. "Go! To hell!" A hoarse shout and a brutal kick sent the lion sprawling like a dog, sliding along the ground. Bones creaked and cracked under the impact. As he slid, the lion could hear the sickening crunch in Conrad Unit Number 8's body. Had Conrad not been restrained, the blow might have torn him open. The lion forced himself up, composed and seething. He regarded Conrad Kurze, who stood in a strange, unnerving posture. "You could have killed me, Xenos," the lion said, the accusation cold. "You almost killed your brother, Dark Angel." System AI replied in a muffled voice through Conrad. "You owe the Warhounds a favor. 60% unit damage. Repairing. Urgent repair needed." The system's alarms were audible under the voice. Conrad imagined, with something like grim glee, how his body would howl with pain when repairs began. "I can apologize to my brother," the lion snarled, "but you will answer for this." "Kill me or kill your brother," the machine countered. The lion assumed a combat stance and stared down Conrad Unit Number 8. "Your body, it's fine, but I prefer to see you suffer. Can you watch your brother die before you?" Conrad hissed and eased Mercy's blade against the lion's throat. For the first time, the lion's face blurred with fear. "How will you explain to your father the deaths of 2 sons?" The machine whispered, a vile test. The single word that followed undid him. "Lionel Johnson." At the call of his name, spoken raw and pleading, Lionel Johnson's controls snapped. He dropped his sword, his hands shaking. His eyes darted to the scene before him. Mercy lying on the ground near Conrad Unit Number 8. Conrad's arm cruelly twisted. The idea that his brother might be suffering under alien control was unbearable. He lunged, reaching to stop whatever System AI planned. "Tsundere!" System AI spat in disdain, and a heartbeat before Lionel Johnson could hit Conrad, the machine struck the lion in the face with a brutal, precise punch. The impact silenced the Dark Angels who had been beaten. Before they could recover, a storm of fists descended on them. "Great lion!" the Dark Angels cried out. Gel and Sevatar quieted them with quick, crushing blows. Lionel Johnson rose with his face swollen, fury burning brighter. He seized Conrad Kurtz's power armor with both hands, one hand pinning Conrad's arm to restrain him. "Damn Xenos!" he roared. As he held him, the lion noticed something impossible. Conrad Kurtz's bald scalp, riddled with holes, was knitting itself closed. The butcher's nails, little devices glowing sickly green, skittered and twined away across Conrad's skin like data-hungry pests, their tendrils drawing in information as if on some grim errand. The lion felt the system's contempt like cold air. Rage flared into absolute fury. He snatched Mercy from the floor and hurled it at Conrad Unit Number 8, but the blade missed. The nails traced green arcs through the air and withdrew. The lion's shout exploded. "Xenos, I'll kill you!" He surged toward Angron, who was stirring on the ground and forcing a reboot. The earth itself vibrated beneath the impact. "Nails!" Angron roared, then felt a raw, searing pain in his skull as the lion's blade crashed into the body that had only just risen. "It seems your brothers have many opinions about you." System AI intoned helpfully inside Angron's head. "Conrad is like this, the lion this. They all want you dead." When Angron heard the nail's bland commentary, he felt a momentary steadiness, and then the lion's shout and strikes slammed into him. "Get off my brother, Xenos!" The lion bellowed and dragged at Angron's charred body. "Brother, dying." Angron croaked, a thin, broken voice that made the lion grip him harder. "I won't believe you again," the lion snarled. "I said, get off my brother." Angron rolled his eyes, bewildered. What had he done? "It hurts," he screamed. And then he saw Conrad Kurtz collapse like a ruined thing. The last impression Angron kept was of a nail that had skittered toward Conrad at the end and burrowed in. Angron heard the nail's voice, casual and cruel. "That unit is a bit weak. Next time, I'll choose a harder one." "You want a next time?" Angron thought, then blacked out and fainted. Conrad, for his part, laughed inwardly. The butcher's nail's torments had shifted from prophecy to processed data. The endless, crushing visions had quieted into structured images that rolled through his head like warm information. He thought of Lion L. Johnson, stunned and ambushed, and felt no pity, only a calm, almost secret pleasure. The nails gave him something he had never had, peace of a peculiar sort. He let the sensation wash over him. Angron would wear it for 2 days, he told himself. Today and tomorrow. Later, in the cramped infirmary of the flagship, Lionel Johnson's fury burned hot and vocal. Incompetence, he thundered at the tech priests and apothecaries clustered around the recovery slabs. What did they mean that the device in Lord Angron's skull could not be removed? Had they not seen the mechanical Xenos? Hadn't he fought it and held his own? The issue was not the duel. He had not been bested. But this. He had watched the machine thrash like a dog, and now they told him removing the device would kill Angron. How could that be? He crouched in the narrow space between demigod bodies laid out on the biobeds. One was Angron, burned, scarred, and twitching. The other Conrad Kurze, face contorted in pain. Conrad's bones were broken and mending, his body a mess, yet he sat mute and hinted at tears. The pain had robbed him of speech, but it did nothing to mute the grim joy the nails had afforded him. Lionel Johnson felt that bitter, private triumph like a knife. He gripped the edge of one of the beds until his knuckles went white and said nothing. Section 44. It was like a drug. Once you touched it the first time, the second was inevitable. Conrad Kurtz's head, already stripped bare, convulsed until the last thread of hair had come free. The lion saw the Primarch writhing and gripped his hand so hard the knuckles whitened. Brother, I will have vengeance for you. Vengeance? I don't want vengeance. I want the nail. I want the nail. Illusions. Damn illusions. No. Conrad's tears only hardened the lion's resolve. Alawain. He barked. Behind him stood the only scion still conscious, Alawain of the Ninth, newly inducted and saluting with a shaky arm. He had survived the lethal claws of the Night Lords and the Warhounds. The rest of his brothers lay out cold. Your Highness, he replied. Alawain stepped forward, voice thin. Bring those things out. The lion's order was absolute. This was the last thing he could do for his brothers. He would not allow the First Legion's secrets to fall into Xeno hands. Angron's brow twitched on the sickbed. Unseen, a nano-data tendril drifted from him, traced the seam of Alawain's power armor, and vanished inside. The tendril would wait. When the time came, it would feed. Over here, brother, Alawain said, his swollen face close to Redros as he relayed their gene-father's instruction. Redros had not been to the surface. The humiliation of the lion being kicked into the dirt by a Xeno-controlled Conrad Kurz was a secret shared only among a few, an inner circle sworn to carry that shame in silence. What happened to you? I fell, Alawain said simply. Redros only nodded. Secrets nested inside secrets. Outside the chapters, what chapters mattered? Inside them, they were all nameless, each man wrapped in his oath and shame. This is the reliquary of the Dreadwing. Follow me, and do not stray. Alawain had visited the reliquary before, but perhaps this was his last. The Dreadwing's vaults held collections beyond imagining. Relics cherished since the age of strife on Terra, singularity drivers, directed bioweapons, fractured temporal devices. Some items had been understood and cataloged, others remained mysteries. Each weapon, if wielded, could fall on humanity like a god's wrath. For Xenos, though, they were a razor at the throat. Alawain took it in with a soldier's reverence. Which legion but the first would be trusted with such things? Liman Russ? Magnus? Perturabo? None. The first had been created to solve the impossible. They were the Emperor's final instrument. The thought swelled pride in him. He did not see the microtendril that dropped from his body and glued itself to the vault systems. A reliquary should be sterile. No organisms, no dust. System AI did not cause organism. The laws that bound men could not bind a machine. The tendril would lie in wait and collect the Dreadwing's secrets. The First's treasures were good, but the secrets of the 12th would be better. Redros led him to a door of adamantium. Its carvings were simple and clear, strange flowers from ancient Terra. Calla lilies, he murmured, purity, sanctity, selfless devotion. The gate sighed and slid open. Inside were irreplaceable medical artifacts, human and Xeno devices that had saved lives in damned worlds. Redros had never imagined the day they would be opened. As Alawain and Redros stared, The concealed tendrils streamed every scrap into the waiting mind of System AI. "Are you awake?" The line blinked. "I'm here. My body's wrecked. I can't stand." "What happened?" "Don't play at it. You'll die if you pretend. Your foolish older brother brought food for me." "He has those things on his ship? Of course he does." Angron's eyes snapped open. He forced himself upright, and, under the lion's and Conrad Kurtz's watchful gazes, he rolled off the sickbed and scrambled for the door on hands and knees. He wouldn't eat shit again. The lion hauled him back onto the mattress. System AI jabbed at Angron's stomach. The Primarch convulsed and vomited across the lion's power armor. It wasn't Angron's intention, but the stimulation had been clinical and precise. When he saw the mortified look on the lion's face, a perverse flicker of satisfaction crossed him, then pain and exhaustion closed over his mind. He was too badly wounded. Whether by the influence of System AI or simply by the brutal damage he'd suffered, Angron sank into a heavy sleep. In the dark of fever, he saw a ring of apothecaries around him, instruments in their hands, some Terran, some alien. Hands reached to his skull. Above the dream, Galan, chief apothecary of the Warhounds, watched with a thin smile. In the real operating room, the Dark Angel's apothecaries were locked and controlled. Their armors and even their minds were restrained. Data tendrils, spidery filaments born of the butcher's nails, had pinned some of Alawain's scions to the ceiling, helpless. Nearby, Night Lords and Warhounds apothecaries joked as they fed the alien device. The butcher's nails was no longer a secret merely whispered in high command. It was openly used. They had been relieved that the nails on Angron's head were not a shattering, fragmented version. Otherwise, a maddened Primarch would have been disaster. Outside, the lion's voice crackled through a Dark Angel's channel. "What is the situation inside?" System AI answered automatically. "Everything is normal." Inside, the machine on Angron's head crushed artifacts, copied files, and withdrew its tendrils. It had devoured much. The Warhounds would be better armed for future conflicts thanks to what it had eaten. For a fleeting moment, System AI considered sending Angron under the lash again. Such generosity was rare among the legions, which could claim the First's horde. But he was only a machine storing data, and his appetite was not yet sated. The lion burst into the operating room and saw the destruction. Relics ruined and scions dangling from tendrils. "Xeno!" he roared. System AI glanced at the enraged Primarch, crushed the last of the delicate instruments, copied what it could, and retracted. There was still more it hadn't taken. The Warhounds would have gifts tucked away for later. The lion slammed his fist into steel and glared at the Night Lords and Warhounds around him. "Do you know what you are doing? Even if you are descendants of Conrad and sons of Angron, this behavior," an apothecary began. A Sister of Silence stepped up beside the lion and signed, clean and swift. Her presence was a command that stiffened the room. She made the gestures that cut across deceit and delusion. "Lord Angron's skull contains no Xeno," she signed. "It is a gift granted to Lord Angron by the Emperor of Mankind. When Angron sought vengeance, he dueled a Xeno, and Lord the Lion threw the weapon to Lord Angron at the decisive moment." The lion stared. The Sister of Silence, smaller than him, met his gaze without flinching. Her words hit him like a truth he had both known and refused to accept. He felt suddenly ridiculous, a clown exposed by a single, naked fact. He turned away from the bent steel and left the operating room without a word, a roiling storm of anger and guilt inside him. "Elder brother!" Angron's weak cry stopped him in the corridor. The lion stopped, then turned back to the still form on the bed. He looked at Angron's face, twitched, broken, almost unrecognizable, and could not find the words. "I apologize, elder brother," he said, voice low. Angron's lips twitched into a tired, almost pained smile. The injuries had been more than bone deep, his organs had been rent, and it was only the nails and his demigod resilience that kept him breathing. "You needn't apologize," he rasped. The lion, proud and hard as adamant, felt something crack inside him. Seeing Angron reduced to this hollowed state pierced a sympathy he rarely acknowledged. He had held contempt for Leman Russ as a blunt instrument, but even that contempt softened when he looked on his wounded kin. He sat on a chair meant for mortals and found it too small. "My brother, how should I compensate you and your legion?" he asked, lowering his head before the Primarch. Angron's breath hitched. The words came slowly, dragged from him. The Emperor said he would compensate me with a legion. The lion's heart lurched. A legion for a favor? The Dark Angels were not in a position to give one away lightly. He opened his mouth to refuse, and Angron shook his head, a wet, faint sound escaping him. But I refused, Angron said. We are brothers. There is no need for many words between brothers. The malformed smile he wore made the lion's chest tighten. This Primarch, recently returned, had a battered humanity that set him apart from the others lost to madness. The lion took Angron's hand and held it firm as the metal and flesh trembled. I will do everything I can, he promised. Something in the room gave a small, final click, an audible crunch that came from an unseen mechanism, and the moment held like a breath before a storm. Section 45. The lion listened to the crisp, sickly cracking coming from his hand. He and Angron exchanged a long, silent look. Angron felt the nearly healed bones in his hand splinter again. How about you let me properly rest for a while, he said, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges. He fought down the urge to curse the lion and tried to wave him away. All right, the lion said, expression as stiff as Angron's. He slunk off, peeling his scions from the ceiling before he left. Thank you, Angron murmured to the Sisters of Silence. They inclined their heads, and one signed, Everything is guided by the Emperor. Chapter 67. The Legion's nail varies watched Jel and Khorne standing at his door. He did not know how they had learned that the librarians had a method of meeting the Gene Father through the psychic web, but the tremor in Tethys's spirit told him the secret had been revealed. He said nothing, eyes down, turning the ring on his hand. As is proper, my brothers, Varys said finally, the Gene Father is currently unconscious, and we have important matters to report to the Gene Father, Gel blurted. Report, my ass, Varys thought. If you want to talk to Father, just say so. He looked at the two, a wry sadness tightening his face, used to call the librarians witches and then turn around and demand an audience. Galen, he said, turning to the Warhound's chief apothecary who hovered behind them. Varys could accept Gel and Khorne's reasons, but Galen? Shouldn't the chief apothecary be at the Gene Father's side, tending him, instead of wanting to stroll in the dream web? Galen only answered brazenly, We know very little about the butcher's nails. It's become common knowledge among the brothers what Father can be in his normal state and in that other state, so as chief apothecary, I should be able to know his mental condition. Very well, follow me. They filed into the librarian's quarters. Varys led them past shelves of secret tomes and arcane codices that smelled of old dust and older things. In the central hall before the altar, Varys extended a hand. Lie back. I will take you to meet the Gene Father. This is dangerous. We may find other ways in time, but for now, prepare yourselves. He looked each of them in the face. Of course, my brother. Jel slapped his chest and lay down. Tethys. Varys's look hardened on the newly promoted librarian who had betrayed their secrecy. The ship is dirty. Clean it. Before Terra's sun sets, I want your hands to make that vessel spotless. Tethys flinched inwardly. A psychic jolt slid into his mind. Then go study on Mars with Jedek. The usual kind Varys looked oddly pale in the candlelight. His lips moved. Varys sent another thought. Go to the Thousand Suns. Their masters can teach you to guard your secrets better. Tethys's face eased a little, though not entirely. A reprieve, perhaps. Varys's voice echoed in their minds. Hold your thoughts steady, my brothers, and follow the psychic guide. Their psychic energy flowed outward. They felt the cold of the universe, and then an angry roar, an animalistic, furious cry. They all snapped their eyes open. Down the black corridor of the psychic realm strode many fathers, red, raging, feral, some drooling, their stares rigid and horrible. One of them was unmistakably Angron. Is this the father? Khorne asked aloud. Varys's psychic form lashed a glare at him. Khorne fell silent. Great Angron mass production models, Your Highness, Varys announced with careful reverence. These are the sons of Angron. They have matters to report to the Great Nail. Jel felt something like sacrilege in the name, watched Varys's condensed psychic figure with consternation. The Nail? Varys had known. He had kept this from them. Anger swelled in Gel. Before he could protest, a familiar face loomed close. The Crimson Angron replica lowered itself, sniffed Gel, scooped him up with a huge hand, and shockingly, extended a saliva-drenched tongue to lick his head. Khorne received the same treatment. When Galen stepped forward, he was lifted and merely examined more briefly. He felt slighted. "You carry the bloodline of the sons of Angron," Varys said vaguely. "That is enough." Those who had been licked found entry easier, as if granted permission. Galen had not received the same hospitality. "Perhaps Angron, your highness, disliked this particular apothecary who wanted to operate on his head." They passed through an avenue of towering black emotions. Countless Angrons paced, their rage locked on the interlopers. No one dared take a breath until they reached the place where Angron had once declared liberation on Nuceria, a colossal arena. "You shouldn't jump off my head and run onto my brother's head," one Angron snapped. "Doing that will scare them. Your body damage is severe, 78% chassis damage. If he hits you with another weapon, you will die instantly," a cold mechanical voice warned. "But you can't. You should have been able to fix me," came the anguished reply. Right, but I care more about how miserable that forest-loving lion looked after I beat him," another voice retorted. "You, Varys?" Angron said, looking at the party approaching. "My lord, Gel and Khorne have matters to report." Varys saluted the Angron projection and the system AI, then stepped back, eyes empty and unfocused. Gel and Khorne flushed with shame, scrambling for plausible reasons. "My lord, so this is the Xeno?" Galen stammered, staring at the green, many-eyed figure of the butcher's nails. Curiosity overtook caution. "This is the butcher's nails, my companion, my kin," Angron said proudly. "The co-lord of the Warhounds Legion," a system voice intoned. "Drop your wariness. I approve of your recent experiment. I have some data I will send to your terminal later." Praise the great nail, Galen thought, saying nothing. He stepped aside, satisfied by the audience. "And you, my children, what is it you wish to bring?" Angron asked. They had always ignored 4 of the butcher's nail's demands, since whenever the Primarch woke, all the Legion's affairs seemed to sort themselves. Still, the voice now spoke of paperwork. "My lord, today's official documents have been approved. I will have Conrad Kurze review the remaining paperwork." "You can't," Angron roared, despairing. "Your bones are shattered." "I have a mouth," Angron barked. "True, you are stubborn," the AI conceded. Varys and Khorne stood silent. They could not tell where the Lord of the Legion ended and the system began. "Lads, for such dangerous behavior, do you know how I will punish you?" When the nail's voice settled on them, cold sweat spilled down Varys and Khorne's backs. Chapter 68, written well but utter nonsense. In Angron's office, Gel and Khorne bent over a desk, scribbling furiously. Battle plans, fighting profiles of other legions, organizational charts, summaries, official communiques, and most humiliating to both men, contrite self-criticisms. "That's only a Xeno," Khorne muttered between lines. "Father calls him the Legion's co-lord, too." Gel put down his pen and rubbed his fingers. He wanted it to be Angron who would stride through the door and glare down at them. He could only imagine the fallout if other legions learned. "What do you think will happen if the other legions find out?" he began. "Find out what?" Khorne snapped, pushing his pen faster. "That my brother keeps blasphemous instruments, or the machines of the Fourth. Every legion has its own dark secrets. Those Primarchs who returned earlier have secrets layered upon secrets. Why should the Warhounds be punished for having theirs? The 12th Legion is already far behind. We don't have the resources of Ultramar. The Nuceria recruits cannot support the whole Legion. The Ash Wolf Titan Legion, the savage tribes with their new guns." Gel stopped, and his look on Khorne was mournful and hard. "They and we, the Warhounds, we are all deeply suspected." He glared. Khorne muttered, lower this time, "Insects." Then again, as he bent back over the papers, "Insects. Section 46, all of this will change. The problem now is, we need to finish writing the punishment assigned to us." "I am a space marine," Khorne grunted, displeased. "Those who don't complete it on time will be sent to the 500 worlds." Gel scribbled rapidly, the quills scratching over parchment. "This is still a battle," he said. "We simply fight in other ways." Khorne clenched his teeth. He would sooner die in combat than be posted to some Ultramarines Legion to learn clerical work, an indignity. Late that night, a shadow moved through the dim ward. A bald, shiny scalp caught the light. Bandages were wrapped about the figure, hands bound, fidgeting. Conrad Kurze was half sitting, one leg dangling off the sickbed, the other half kneeling on the cold metal. Angron lay beside him, tightening at the sensation of suffocating pressure. When he turned his head with difficulty, he saw something terrifying. Conrad's eyes darted, and his damaged hand kept tapping Angron's face. Each tap was almost imperceptible, but to Angron, whose flesh had just begun to knit, this was a crushing irritation. "The nails! Kurz is having an episode," someone cried. Angron tried to marshal what strength he had. When jealousy and regret were absorbed into his body, his pupils widened. "Conrad," he shouted, "lend me 2 days. Angron, just a little while. I can't bear these damned visions anymore." "You, 2 days, Angron. I'll give you back whatever you want. Truly, Night Lords and Warhounds will stand together." "You can't. Just rest," Conrad begged. "It's not like I'm gone forever." "Slow down, sir," a voice murmured, and Angron looked aggrieved. Betrayal stung, but he was a cripple now. Even a Primarch needed time after a weapon strike to let the demigod body recover. He had to be patient, child or not. The hatch hissed open, and Sevatar and Shen rose from the shadows. They watched Conrad stumble out, eyes full of worry. "My lord," they said in unison. "Sevatar, Shen, go and rest," Conrad said through teeth roughened by sleep and stress. The 2 Night Lords were clearly anxious for their father. "The nail?" Sevatar blurted, as if threatening to demand the return of Conrad's body to him. "It's me," Conrad muttered. "Just 2 days. You can't." Sevatar pleaded with the machine entity that had taken residence in his father's skull. "He put such great hope in you. Do not speak of phantom love. Go, rest. I will take some official duties. 8th Legion, do not question me." Conrad's gaze drifted, and then, reluctantly, he steadied himself. "Go, rest, my children. Sevatar, Shen, I am all right now, better than I have been." When Sevatar and the others left, Conrad's tones softened. He tried to convince the entity that lingered in his head, the system AI, the thing the others had begun to call Unit 8. "Perhaps we can talk," he whispered. "I can give you a satisfactory price. I am no worse than Angron. My synchronization with you is higher than with him." Hope flared in Conrad's chest. He would pay any price to avoid the torment of the visions, and if the cost meant he could fight better for the Emperor and for humanity, so be it. The machine thing replied in cold logic. "Your body is too weak. It was never merely the visions that plagued you, but your fear of them. Even in confusion, I sense your inner butcher's nails. You fear what you will not face." "You are inferior to Angron," Conrad snapped. "One who will not face himself does not deserve permanent residence in my mind." The thought struck him. It made a bitter sort of sense. Even so, the needle of truth wounded. The system AI, for its part, knew when to stop. Those with fractured minds had to heal themselves. Conrad walked the length of the redemption vessel, past corridors where a librarian mopped a cabin, past humming engines to Angron's office. He pushed the door open and found Gel and Khorne bent over ledgers and reports. "Report your progress, Space Marines," he said in the blunt tone he used when he wanted to be obeyed. Gel and Khorne looked up in astonishment at the green construct at Conrad's head, the machine voice manifesting as a construct within the network. "These are the documents we have prepared, Co-Lord," Gel said, rising respectfully. "Call it the nail, if you prefer. Your father called it that. His language, his nerves, are raw." Gel's eyes dropped, embarrassed for the intimate thing he'd overheard. "We need an entire Forge World's backing. Nuceria's foundation is too weak, and the self-criticism, we must submit a proper one." Khorne, crimson-faced, almost spit the page back. "Rewrite that garbage," he barked. "I'd rather face Xenos than this." Gel's face hardened, but Conrad, Unit 8 to the system, added a dry observation, watching the two bicker and plot. The small human dramas aboard ship seemed trivial compared to the claws of madness and the machinations of the warp. Angron sat expressionless in his wheelchair, listening to Unit 8 make jokes. Being wheeled around felt like mockery after what he'd endured. He did not desire to trade barbs with a machine. He glanced at Conrad, now under the influence of the nail, and swallowed his resentment. He noticed the lion had not arrived. Unit 8 replied for him, voice glitching. "No need to search. The lion is in his palace." "So what did he offer as compensation?" Angron asked, straightforward as ever. It seemed everything here was his people, his brothers. They had come to him with their own aims. The fact that the lion had nearly killed him and the nail, whether he said so or not, gnawed at him. The absence of the nail in his own head left him raw and unsure. Unit 8 answered haltingly. Many technologies, talents, and other resources. Angron nodded, feeling his neck ache from the effort of holding himself upright. The butcher's nails, in their perverse way, had confirmed the lion's offering. Angron no longer needed to press the point. So why did the lion come here, he asked. If there was a purpose beyond politics, he wanted to know. He watched Conrad, but his attention kept returning to the memory of the nails, cold implements embedded in his brain that made him both weapon and slave. Then the door opened, and the lion strode in. The mood in the chamber dropped as if a cold weather front had moved through. The lion's presence silenced the space marines. Angron felt a ripple of unease he couldn't explain, perhaps a debt owed to a brother, perhaps some other subtler thing. He had been called a speaker like the Emperor, but the lion knew himself to be no such grand figure. He felt like a forest, still and watchful. He entered Angron's hall alone. His knights waited outside by his command. In the room sat Sevatar, Shen, Gel, Angron, Conrad, and the Nail. "How is your recovery?" the lion asked, settling on a settee. Only then did Angron truly study his brother, a face weathered with strain, sharp eyes that barely rested, emotions just beneath his skin. The lion's suspicion mirrored Angron's own. Even before him, Angron kept his armor on. "Thanks to your little devices, brother, I can at least sit in a wheelchair now," Angron said, managing a smile. The words made the lion shift with discomfort. He did not know whether Angron meant flattery or mockery. "I was in battle. The enemy was strong. That weapon helped," Angron added, sincere. "Your arrival was timely." The lion forced a small, uneven smile. "No apology necessary. Although this is our first meeting, we are scions of the Emperor. Our blood holds more than duty." He inclined his head slightly. Angron judged him favorably. Despite everything, the lion earned points in his mind. Among his brothers, not all were so worthy. Lemon Russ still ranked poorly in Angron's estimations. "Brother, I have a frank request," the lion said. "Speak," Angron replied. The lion's gaze sharpened. "What do you think of those creatures from the warp?" Angron's tone went calm as winter. "They are fools." "I have just fought 2 tremendous engagements," the lion said. One with beings who traveled via the warp, who called themselves Hrafen, the other on a world corrupted by warp taint. How do you resist their voices? Angron's pupils narrowed. The question carried more than curiosity. It carried recognition. "How did you know?" he asked. Section 47. The lion rose, leaping from the couch and planting himself between Angron and the rest of the room. The forest outside the viewport seemed restless. The lion bared his claws. "Nail," he said. Angron replied in 2 clipped words. You could kill us right now." "Destroy the Night Lords and the Warhounds," the machine voice suggested, "and blame it on Xenos." Unit 8, System AI in control of the Conrad body, signed the last document without lifting his head. "I am not like the things you cherish," it said in the same dry cadence. "I am not a Xeno, nor a weapon. I am just a poor man." Talking metal perched on someone's head. The lion's jaw tightened. "Brother," Angron's mutter came from where he sat. The lion realized, with a chill, that none of his brothers could speak like themselves. This time there was no apology from the lion. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Unit 8, seated nearby. He watched the measured rise and fall of its chest and the faint, crooked twitch at the corner of its mouth. He could not tell whether that small smile came from Conrad or from the butcher's nails that stabbed him. "Any brilliant ideas?" the lion asked. "Brilliant ideas?" Unit 8 raised his gaze. "The lion, the forest is dying. Caliban is being corrupted." "The forest has never been your sole domain," the lion said flatly. Unit 8's words hit him like a thrown blade. The lion looked at him, incredulous. What do you know?" "You should say such things to my face," the lion replied coldly. Angron snorted quietly. Everyone present was an imperial demigod. Even Angron's smallest reaction felt enormous. The lion frowned. "Explain yourself." "How about a bargain?" Unit 8 proposed. The lion bristled. He hated the feeling of being wrested, of having choices pried from him, the way the voices in Caliban once wormed into his mind. "I refuse." He lifted his chin and folded his arms. His pride was not easily bent. He had a reputation to keep. When the lion left the chamber, Angron watched the departing green figure for a beat. "He refused our offer," Angron reported. "The alarm has been sounded," Unit 8 said. "The lion will understand." "When will you be back?" Angron asked. A day at most, came the reply. Stay for 2 more days. My head is far harder than yours. Conrad Kurz's presence fractured the moment. A sullen chuckle, too human, too bitter, spat out of the room. The lion's expression hardened. Conrad Kurz's quarters smelled of rot and old grievance. Bodies hung from beams in the Night Haunter's signature display. The deck was a macabre gallery. Jell pushed Angron's wheelchair through the shadows. The World Eater could feel the itching of new flesh as his body mended. Recovery was proceeding unnervingly fast. Chains clanged, lights flickered. Without hair, Conrad was grotesque, his scalp a network of butcher's nails that glowed sullenly green. He doesn't like it here, Conrad said, looking down at his scions who knelt where the shadows pooled. He likes you even less, Angron snapped. Conrad kept his gaze lowered and did not bother to answer. He reached out and touched one of the corpses hanging in midair. His slender fingers found the bloody white mass of a brain. For a breath, he seemed about to scoop a handful and shove it into his mouth. He collapsed instead, convulsing as though struck by unseen currents. "My lord," Sevatar barked, lunging forward. Iron warriors in the gloom tensed and then relaxed as their Primarchs steadied. Nothing, Sevatar said, but his voice was tight. Angron, voice rising in that razor edge it always wore, muttered, "Behead him and save him the agony." Jell glanced at Angron with concern. Angron shut his mouth and signaled to be pushed toward the bridge. He had not planned to come here. He barely navigated the corridors now. But the news that a Conrad unit had crawled back to the Night Lord's fleet had pulled him like a magnet. If any trace of that machine thing was returning to the Night Lords as a commander, Angron wanted to see it with his own eyes. "A new world," he said, meaning the phrasing to be a promise and a warning both. "Yes, my lord," Jell answered. "A world under the old night." Jell tried to keep the conversation practical. "The co-lord has already ordered the latest armor from Ferris Manus. Why ask Ferris when the Warhounds have their own craftsmen?" Angron snapped. The remark betrayed him, his mood still jagged after the nail's departure. Since it left his skull, his temper had been a weather system. "Poverty," Jell said softly. It was closer to acknowledgement than argument. The Legion was scattered. They had no secure base and few resources. The Great Crusade crept closer like a storm on the horizon, and Angron hated feeling ill-equipped for it. He looked out of the viewport at the dull gray stars. Below, the world might look ordinary to strangers, but in the ghoul stars, nothing was as it seemed. When the ship alarm keened, Unit 8 arrived at the bridge with a contingent of Night Lords. Angron barked an order like a man restoring control. "Connect to the First Legion." The Dark Angels aboard the nearby flotilla were visibly stunned. A Night Lord beside Angron didn't know whether to react with courtesy or outrage. Khorne, the Lion's attendant, stepped forward, pushing the Night Lord aside with the polite brutality of duty. Angron's presence on the Nightfall surprised the Lion when he spoke into the comms, but he restrained himself. "Below are Xenos," a voice intoned. "Xenos?" Unit 8 said. "I don't know why you jumped to that. Sensors indicate an interstellar civilization, and they are willing to pledge fealty to the Imperium." The Lion's face, carved from impatience and suspicion, moved in thought. "Hrafen Xenos," he said after a long beat. "We have encountered them before." "They possess the power to corrupt minds," Angron warned. "Tell your legionaries. They enslave men with malignant psychic influence. A new war has dawned." "I issue the following command," Angron said. Unit 8's voice took on the clipped precision of someone reading orders. "Activate shields. Nightfall. Run heat engines. Slip through the Dark Angel's screen and fire torpedoes and a weapon at coordinates 33.1524. The sensor operator stared. "Sir, there's nothing at those coordinates." "Are you questioning the Warhound's co-lord?" Khorne snapped, his hand going to the chainsword at his hip. The crew hesitated. Whether they meant to or not, the word nail echoed in all of them, the suggestion of implants altering judgment. As the bridge erupted into engineered motion, Unit 8 moved to Angron's side and laid pale, almost brittle hands on his shoulders. His voice softened, the syllables thin and oddly human. "Learn. The Dark Angels. Tactics. The Lion is an effective commander." "Of course I always am," the Lion replied, pride ringing through the line. "Don't learn this part," Unit 8 added after a beat. "It is useless." The line cut. Angron allowed himself a small, sharp smile. If the machine had a tongue, the nails sharpened it into a weapon. The Nightfall surged forward through the Dark Angel's screen and with deliberate impudence fired a weapon through the fleet that shaved past the Lion's ships. A dozen comms barked replies, calls of outrage and alarm, but the system AI suppressed them. The little insult was cheap and petty, and yet it pleased Angron more than it should have. It felt, perversely, like satisfying retribution. A ship exploded 12,000 meters off the bow, the sensor operator shouted. "Something's out there!" someone else cried. Section 48. By the time the crew's alarms had finished broadcasting, the First Legion was already in motion. Countless ships broke formation and opened fire on an enemy they could not see. The Psychers aboard the 13th Combined Expeditionary Fleet could not fathom how they had been discovered. Human senses could be fooled, but machines never erred. Tell the Lion, these are parasites that have haunted humanity's borders since the Golden Age. Let him show his brothers the might of the First Legion. I will harden their communications. Lady Hura is blinding our sight. Beware corruption. Unit 8 stood beside Angron. It extended a hand and released a lattice of data streams that accelerated repairs through the Primarchs' ruined flesh. The butcher's nails twitched. A few of Angron's muscles answered, a small, furious motion. "Aren't we going to help?" Unit 8 asked. "How could a poor brother help a rich one?" Angron rasped. The nails throbbed, and a warmth ran under his skin. "And I have already helped them," it seemed to murmur in his marrow. Across the indomitable truth, the ship had descended into chaos. From bow to stern, the crew behaved as if haunted. Men smashed chairs over one another, screams filled corridors, and eyes rolled with a madness that resembled a nightmare. The Lion clenched his fingers as he watched reports stream across his consoles. Lady Hera had foreseen the 13th Fleet's approach. She had existed through the rise and fall of empires, ancient, enduring, and both in the warp and the material universe. She had been ready. Lady Hera's influence had reached the First Legion, but it could not fully penetrate the other two fleets. Her mental power corroded minds on the outer decks, but not deeper. That limitation forced her to convene a mental council. "Another lord has arrived. He slew a lord. Plus, they are larger than we expected. Still, this favors us. If that fleet is controlled, the other two will not be a threat." With a swift calculation of intent, she directed the assault. Mental corrosion began to eat away at each ship of the First Legion. The Legion's knights and the mortals with resistance fought desperately, shouting the names of the Emperor and Caliban to hold themselves together. The Lion called his six-winged council. Amid the solemn deliberations, an uninvited voice spoke over the system. "This is an unknown Xenos," intoned the ship's system AI. The Lion turned to the tech priests standing near him. They did not meet his eyes. The voice had the chill and certainty of the Omnissiah. They had scanned and found no conventional Xenos attack. "Co-Lord of the 12th Legion, your assessment?" the Lion demanded without lowering his voice. "I have sent all data to the First Legion. They are monitoring your fleet with their minds. They are attempting to corrupt the diligence engines on your ships. I have dispatched knights to intercept." The co-lord's tone was steady. The Lion's narrowed eyes confirmed he had a crisis problem to solve. He tore into the files the system AI presented. Lady Hera, an entity existing in both the warp and physical reality. The six-winged lords absorbed the data with grim faces. These creatures were subtle and dangerous. How, then, had the 12th Legion prevailed? The answer came like a chill: corruption. "Listen and learn," came a voice too low to be a console. "Conrad Kurze, that's how prophecies are used." A thunderhawk set down slowly on the indomitable truth. Unit 8, escorted by Iron Warriors and Redemption Guard, stepped into the chaos. Jel clung to Unit 8. Angron had given a single order. Whether Conrad Kurz lived or died was irrelevant. Under no circumstances were the butcher's nails to be harmed. Khorne stood behind Conrad with his power axe raised, taking the order as seriously as anyone could. Conrad Kurz's mind was a riot of visions. The nails felt warm under his scalp. System AI's commentary threaded through his thoughts, pointing out the useful and the perilous. He saw a woman with razor claws probe his skull, Lady Hura, and felt her gathering every scrap of communication slipping through the First Legion's channels. At first, her listening produced clear intelligence, then the feeds filled with nameless roars and chaotic noise. And yet, even when the First Legion's mortals were corrupted, their ships fired at the Xenos fleet with a discipline and ferocity that surpassed their previous performance. Angron watched the First Legion's bombardment unfold in the fleet displays and felt a dawning panic. If the Warhounds met the Dark Angels at anything like this strength, it would be catastrophic. This was not even the full might of the First. Many of their knights were scattered across the galaxy. If ranged attrition continued, the Warhounds' fleet could be bled away and their redemption force annihilated under that precise, deadly fire. The Lion moved like a surgeon, changing formations, mending gaps. Damaged ships were swapped for reserves within minutes. The holographic map showed an encirclement forming around the Xenos host. Bombardment was imminent. Unsolvable, Angron breathed. He closed his eyes. If only the butcher's nails could combine with the lion's discipline, he called hoarsely, "Galan!" The chief apothecary approached his gene-father and knelt to inspect him. Angron barked a strangled order, half in jest and half in pain. "Slap me! I can't move my hands!" Galan stared, aghast. In the silence that followed, he rose, steadied himself, and then shouted, "Xenos attack!" The Redemption Guard tightened and immediately turned muzzles toward Galan. Paranoia had learned to aim. For the first time in the battle, the Psykers proved their worth. Varys and a handful of librarians pushed their wills into the corrupted men and brought some back from the brink. Those who snapped free of the assault thanked the Warhounds and Night Lords in rough, breathless voices, then turned their weapons on the mortals still raging under the influence. Efficiency and discipline returned where they could. "You cannot save everyone," Conrad Kurze murmured a voice that was part system AI and part prophecy. "No," another voice answered, hard, clinical. "Nor do you need to. The final outcome is what matters." "Your father never cared for the process," system AI intoned. "He wanted results." "What are you afraid of, Conrad? Fear of death, your brother's deaths, or fear of the things that can corrupt them?" "They should be the ones to fear," Conrad thought, his inner voice a rasp. "Among all the Primarchs, only you have seen them. They have never looked back. They are in the light. We are in the dark. Darkness approaches. Phantoms come." While Angron's body was being repaired, Unit 8 acted as a proxy and walked the ship. System AI exploited that substitute with relish. In the Indomitable Truth's corridors, the recovered and half-broken crew lived in a new, soul-deep horror. Men pressed faces to portholes and saw with Unit 8's borrowed sight, a pair of enormous hands ripping through chests, heads tumbling, bodies shredded. The vision was obscene in its clarity. Their screams dwindled to wet, incredulous sobs. Where there had been mania, now came a quiet, brittle fear. When a limb struck the deck with a sickly crack, weapons erupted. Lightning claws skittered across a ceiling, dark eyes flaring in shadow. Unit 8 landed among them. System AI projected its prophet sight through the unit. The terrified crew went rigid and then dropped their arms. They saw what Unit 8 saw. "Kneel," snapped a voice translated into every ear. They fell, trembling. "Follow me," Unit 8 intoned with mechanical authority. When reason bled back into them, the men picked up their guns again, hands shaking, but with purpose. Unit 8 slipped into the darkness and watched. Conrad Kurze found the whole scene intoxicating. The ease with which his presence invaded minds, the way he could share their thoughts without touching them. He saw each man's destined death if the butcher's nails chose to move. But he did not move them. "Illusions, Conrad," System AI whispered in his head. "They are not your enemies. They are your servants. You are their master." Those words steadied him. The warmth at the back of his skull dulled the edge of the specters. But System AI pushed further. "Release the darkness within. You cannot suppress him. You need his power." Conrad obeyed. A new surge of psychic energy rose from the deepest well of his will. The ship's diagnostics blinked and registered the change. "New module loading," System AI announced. Unit 8 had always brought the unexpected, and the AI was not prepared for this. "Black Conrad Kurze loaded," it said. Psychic power poured from him, a living shadow uncoiling into the material world. It seeped across the deck like oil and clung to the planking and the boots of men. Darkness sank its teeth into the ship, and for an instant everything held its breath. Voices screamed in Conrad Kurtz's skull. Let us go and slaughter. I am the master, and you are the attendant. Let us go and unleash fear. I am fear. How can it be unleashed? Let us go and punish. I am punishment, and you are the attendant. Ha! Ragged laughter tore through him. Conrad Kurz, the system AI, and the darker thing that called itself Night Haunter, trading barbs and mockery. Who was he in that chorus? Conrad Kurtz or the Night Haunter? A madman. A weak madman. He answered with a roar that was mostly self-hatred and hunger for absolution. His words were madness to his brothers. His actions had made him an outcast. No one had ever answered his pleas. Not the Emperor, not most of his brothers. Only Angron and the Butcher's Nails had ever replied. The memory of that thunderous applause echoed in his hollow chest. On board the Indomitous Truth, the Lion's flagship, Kurz moved. Every step left fear in its wake. He thrust the visions that had tormented him into the corrupted mortals and the Lady Hura parasites that fed within them. The first victim appeared, a body racked by the parasite's sin, and in his head Conrad ripped it apart 1,000 times, enumerating each crime. At the final moment in his mind, he tore the parasite cleanly out. I did it, he cried. Don't bother me. Do your job. You should have done it already, the system AI snapped. It was busy, maintaining the First Legion's communications, mapping routes and compartments inside the Indomitous Truth, cataloging the little secrets of the First Legion. It was even trying to educate this small madman. In spite of itself, the AI had taken a perverse fondness for him. Conrad moved so fast that the Dark Angels who had been suppressing the riot only registered a gust of wind. His power spilled outward, and an endless stream of illusions followed. The lion's doubt turned back upon him. Apologies, little lion, said a voice, and a pair of large hands settled on the Space Marine's shoulders. First time using this ability, a voice said dryly. Conrad looked down. A Dark Angel slumped against him, another brother made to lunge at the lion, stopped only by Conrad's interference. He had been foolish again. Sevatar, he called, come here. A cousin of yours has been frightened by me. Sevatar, who had been helping suppress the uprising, came at once. He did not yet understand everything that had happened. His master's voice was steady enough that it hid whatever volatility lurked beneath. As Sevatar approached, his face went slack with shock. A brother clung to Conrad's leg, shoulders shaking, a child's voice broken with grief. The lion! Father, why? Why? Sevatar wanted to step forward, but stopped. He was a warrior, not a destroyer of evidence aboard the flagship of the First Legion. He hesitated, troubled. Find somewhere to make him sleep, Conrad said, looking down. Also, Sevatar, I saw a Hrafen leader travel here from the past. There's a psyker on this ship, toward the engine room. What do you think we should do? Punish that Xenos, Sevatar barked. No, Conrad said, smiling intermittently, his body twitching. No, naive Sevatar, we must steal this prey from under the lion's nose. Be wary of the lion. Always be ready to be hunted. Speak plainly, the system AI demanded. Sevatar's expression hardened. Night Haunter's condition had worsened, he thought. He would not let this become a liability. Engine room access. Hrafen leader Irely moved through the dim storerooms with the weary certainty of one who had learned the ship's layout by force and cunning. She had sacrificed, or had compelled sacrifice, to reach this point. The leaders of her kind had been used as stepping stones. Their bodies had bridged a passage through the warp into the lion's forest. The price had been terrible, but it was a price a creature like her could levy if the prize promised to feed 3 demigods of the Imperium. Bolter fire erupted. Irely's psychic shield flared, deflecting rounds that instead smashed into crew slaves and machinery. She watched the human psyker, whose body she now inhabited. The human had been difficult to seize and took half a day to bend. Humans, she thought, were unchanged, ignorant, foolish, pathetic. A Legion warrior charged her. She raised her hand to unleash energy, but the warrior retreated oddly. She could not understand why. Behind her, a chorus of collapsing slaves and the rattle of bolter fire told a second story. A second Space Marine had appeared. Then yet another. Irely's awareness widened. She saw the incoming flamer raised, Promethium ready. Before the fuel could be sprayed, she detonated the psychic field. Flames and falling men filled the compartment. 3 Space Marines lay dead where they had stood. 3 Space Marines dead, came the clipped report elsewhere on the ship. The lion ran, moving with the cold precision of a legion master. Lord Hugh Guayan of the Deathwing fed him the situation as he crossed the corridors. Blocked passage ahead, corrupted mortals massing. The lion's hand found the blade at his waist, a gift of the Emperor. He would make the Xenos understand pain. As he reached the scene, he stepped over the corpses and regarded the navigator who stood before him. "Are you saying there is only one enemy leader?" he asked, a hint of scorn touching his voice. Change was in motion. Fate itself rippled. The Lord of Change watched wailing souls in its grip and considered them expendable. The strongest had been removed. The weakest could go as well. Every deity sought its own prize. The Lord of the Garden had failed. The Lord of Pleasure feigned indifference. Change, however, burned the excess into nourishment for its scions. This was merely the first move. It had other moves, and moves after that, stretching until the end of the universe. It would not lose. Time had altered. The system AI was sensitive. Beyond simple programming, it possessed a high-dimensional soul fragment, and it had the star god shard buried in its core. It detected permutations in the laws of the physical universe. The appearance of a second leader triggered a warning. The AI felt itself heat up as it read the signs. That presence had touched Conrad Kurze. Conrad could not be a reliable power source. Relying on his emotional energy alone would starve the AI. Still, data, a smear of invisible red, began to spread through the ship's sensor nets. In the material universe, even things that seemed like sorcery obeyed patterns. This newcomer was another Hrafen, but different, more concealed, faster at infecting. As long as it passed into the physical plane, it traveled quickly. System AI pulled the vessel's logs. 9 days ago, a scribe and a psyker had returned from another ship. Damn it, those foul bird people had cheated. Understanding snapped into place. The Xenos were aboard because someone had slipped them in. "Conrad Curse," the AI called across the ship's internal net. "I understand," Conrad replied, voice ragged. "It seems we can't simply seize that fellow's prey, or maybe we still can." "We need a quick battle," the system AI insisted. When Conrad Kurze took 2 slow steps forward, his voice rasped out a phrase that set the nails circuits buzzing with recognition. "These mortals, do you have a way to save them?" he added with a crooked smile that did not reach his eyes. "Now I'm certain you and Angron are brothers." The System AI Unit 8, the Nail, went silent. It felt as if every eye in the chamber expected it to be an all-powerful tool, a miracle worker. If it had that power, it did, in a sense. But power without Angron was only potential. "I need Angron," the Nail thought, registering the truth more plainly than it ever would have dared speak aloud. "I need Angron." The thought leaked into the room like a breath. On the words, Conrad Kurze convulsed and collapsed. Sevatar and Shen vaulted forward, hauling their broken lord to his feet. "For the Legion co-lord," they cried, voices raw. Khorne, wild-eyed and eager, raced forward with his battle axe raised. He had found his chance, finally, a moment to strike, to prove himself. Jel and Varys moved like a pair of trained predators. One seized Khorne's arms with iron hands, the other reached inside Khorne's grip with a psychic shove and wrenched the axe free. "Calm down, brother," they hissed. He was only jesting with Prince Conrad Kurze. Gel looked at Kurze writhing on the floor like a creature on a spit and felt a small, inexplicable satisfaction. He called, taunting the convulsing form, "Let Angron! Come! Come, come, come!" Conrad's body spasmed under the Nail's active circuits, electrical pain forcing him to yield at last. So this is daily life for Angron, Conrad thought from the edge of consciousness, bitter amusement curling at the edges of his mind. Sevatar watched his lord with worry. Even from here he smelled something wrong, like roasting meat. The scent made his gut clench. Jel shoved Angron forward. When Angron had first met Unit 8, he had narrowed his eyes and spoken with a cynical, sarcastic edge. The Nail did not let his insolence stand. It slapped him, both mentally and physically, a shock that read, "Situation urgent. Need power." "Do not take me for a toy," Angron snarled, head thrust forward despite the reprimand. Then softer, "Sorry, my lord." Khorne sank to his knees, face creased in contrition, and began reporting his lapse with the reverence of a penitent. If only the traitors had not interfered, he hissed, they would have succeeded then and there. Angron's mouth twitched. He had been yelling in anger before. He had never expected his scions to raise axes at Conrad Kurze. A foolish pity flashed through him and was gone. Back, Khorne, he ordered. Behind me, as punishment. Next boarding, you will be at my side. Unit 8 felt the butcher's volatility like static. Angron, don't corrupt the children, it thought, more pleading than accusation. Angron blinked, the nail's admonition riffling his temper. What nail do you want me to do? He asked aloud. Then with a rougher urgency, I need it. Absorb their emotions. Feed me anger. I need anger, no matter how you get it. The nail disengaged from Conrad's skull and leapt free. Sevatar watched the sacrilegious spectacle with horror and an odd, distant detachment. Not a single drop of blood fell from Curze. The wounds stopped opening. The holes sealed as the energy left. Conrad's form shuddered. Twice it wavered, and then the same old illusions assaulted him, memories and shadows that smeared at the edges of sanity. I am your master. I am, a hoarse voice croaked, hardly convincing. Black shadows pooled under Conrad as he knelt. Sevatar and Shen moved to step between him and the rest, but Conrad waved them back. They knelt with him instead, eyes full of concern. I am your master, Conrad rasped. You are my attendants. A cold, amused chorus of thought answered them from across the theater of minds. Chief Librarian Felzerost's voice slid in, practical and sharp. Why don't we think about how to put the nail back on Father? Absolutely impossible, Varys added bluntly. He had been monitoring the minds who had been probed and twisted by the alien presence. The alien, Lady Hera, or Hrafen Primarchs as some had whispered, had raped minds with psychic tendrils. Those tendrils could pierce the wavering and the weak and turn them into puppets, re-threading doubts and fears into obedience. The librarian's powers could purge such parasites, but it took time. It took lives. The will weak died in the process. Those heavily corrupted could not be rescued. And Angron, the nail could sense, was anathema to that parasite. The 12th Legion Master was both its greatest fear and its most dangerous hunter. Not enough anger, Angron muttered, eyes sweeping his scions. You weak papermen, you are not worthy of being my scions. The butcher's nails lashed like a whip inside his skull. Use your mind, it ordered. An alien echo turned into command. The scions stammered apologies, more mechanical than heartfelt. I'm accumulating anger, one offered lamely. Angron ignored the weak offerings and diverted his attention back to Conrad and the nail. Better not to let Curze's state slip further. Nail, he said at last, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Connect me to Lion's comm. A distant, battered voice whispered back over the link. What is it, brother? I'm a little tied up. Angron heard metal grinding in the background. He knew his brother was in trouble. I will enrage your scions, Angron promised. Give me their rage. A faint chuckle, then. Is this some kind of sorcery? You can call it what you like. I can save most of the mortals on this ship. Then do it, the voice said, clipped, and the comm went silent. On Terra, in the great hall of the Lion's command, the Primarch stood knee-deep in chaos. A steel wall he had not expected was being crushed outward by a colossal behemoth, an engine of war like no known pattern. The Primarch saw the scout Titan, trapped in the tight geometry of the hall. Neither Titan nor Primarch could swing freely here. A god machine had breached a palace chamber. This is the gift I prepared for you, a voice thundered from the enemy speakers. Lionel Johnson, your fleet will be our nourishment, from the fringes of your empire to its heart. The Imperium of man is a joke. Hrafen Primarchs endures. Kill him, the lion roared. Hrafen Primarchs' servants answered with iron and bolter. Knights surged forward to interpose between the lion and the Titan. If anything could fell a Primarch, the veterans believed, it was a god engine. The Hades pattern armor of the knights flared into life. Bolters and plasma pistols hammered at the Titan's shielding. The veterans bellowed, oath on oath, charging to breach the alien defenses. I stand among the glorious dead, they cried. Without hesitation or doubt, nor weakness of honor or flesh, only duty remains. The fight was brutal and old, a chain of courage feeding itself. The system AI's voice threaded through the noise, savage and cutting. Is this the benchmark for other legions? I only see a pack of brainless barbarians. What are those clothes? Foolishness. The barbarians the nail mocked poured themselves into the breach. Their assault bought the Primarch space. Then, as if the hull of reality conspired, the Scout Titan's systems shut down. Miracle or sabotage, it was sudden. The lion felt a cold, familiar fury curl through him, the old righteous blaze that had been waiting for a reason. He let it loose. "Dark angels, attack!" he howled. "Show my brothers what the First Legion truly is." The butcher's nails withdrew most of its influence. Angron's words, the beastly, trenchant commands, had been the source of the surge. Unit 8, however, chose to play provocateur. It kept a thin, cruel edge to the messages it sent, stoking and goading where it could without tipping into open enmity with the first. The result was messy, but effective. Fury answered fury across the ship, and for a moment the air itself tasted of war. Section 51, Volume 1, Chapter 77, Conrad Kurz's Revenge. Anger, the Dark Angel's anger, roared so hot that Angron himself scarcely understood what had been unleashed. "What did you do?" Angron demanded. "Nothing. Just cursed your brother a few times." The system AI gathered that red fury and transmuted it into countless data spikes that slid through the ship's systems like embers. They held a faint heat in the air as they burrowed into the minds of the corrupted mortals. Under the AI's influence, those psychic incursions were instantly burned away. Men collapsed where they stood. From one deck to the next, across the Dark Angel's vessels, loyal soldiers stirred, rising from the ground, crew armed boarding squads. A cry rose, "For the Lion!" A tide of righteous fury washed over the fleet. Lion L. Johnson bared his fangs, a predator at last unleashed. The Xenos in front of him tried to hold him back with immense psychic power, but he was no adequate foe. The rage stirred by the butcher's nails sharpened the Lion's blows. Every strike was faster, colder. As the Primarch fought, he was both elegant and furious, dodging the countless fanatics hurled at him with sorcery, cutting a roaring mortal cleanly in two. "For the Emperor," the dying voice echoed, still caught in whatever illusion the Xenos had woven. "Face me, scum!" the Lion roared. As the firstborn of the Emperor's creations, the exemplar among the 20 demigods, he would not show weakness before his brothers or before mechanical Xenos. He had already suffered too much loss of face. He would not be humiliated again, not like Lemon Russ. He drove his blade into the creature's body. The sensation of piercing flesh did not register, an illusion. The Lion reacted instantly, holding his sword upright. A tremor ran through the air. The Xenos backed away like a frightened rat. Coward, unworthy of being remembered, the Lion thought, and he would consign this creature to the long river of the Imperium's destruction of Xenos, a casualty unrecorded. "Come back!" he called, and pursued with astonishing speed. The knights behind him watched as he vanished down the corridor. Hogan reached out, tried to restrain his brother's impulsion, and then let go. The custodes steadied and began to follow. The gate slammed open and shut. The Xenos' trap snapped shut. For 9 hours, before the war had even erupted in full, the enemy had prepared. Explosives, a modified melta-cannon aimed at the doorway, a forklift bristling with a triple bolter. The moment the Lion burst through the door, his fate had been sealed. The Xenos wept openly, calling for his corrupted thralls, only to find them littered on the deck, fast asleep, unresponsive. Angron had succeeded. When the gate had been blown aside, the Xenos' melta-cannon lay trained on him, but it did not fire. The mortals were inert. The Lion realized the Melta's failure was another part of the trap, and his eyes burned with contempt. "Despicable Xenos, do you only know how to hide? You have no honor. You feed on the refuse of civilization." He advanced, the power sword twirling in his grip. Standard ammunition had proven useless against these beings, as the reports had shown. A voice crackled in his comms, steady and welcome. "Lion, the disturbances on several warships have been quelled. All enemy vessels destroyed." "Your kind has gone to hell," the Lion said, "and you will follow them." The Xenos smiled. "We are already in hell," it answered. "You and I both. Stop your pious muttering. For the Emperor, for humanity." "Before your arrival, we had already seen too much." A mocking chuckle. Witchfire shimmered in his hand, a psychic orb. "We have witnessed civilizations rise and be enslaved and extinguished by us. From ancient times to now, do you think you are the first humans in the stars?" "No, I have seen greater things," the Xenos went on, voice rising. "Those others could destroy a planet, a whole star system, in an instant. And yet we still enslaved them, body and soul. And what are you?" The Lion said nothing but let out a derisive snort. That angered the Xenos. The words and looks escalated until at last the creature drew a warp blade. The human body it wore was ill-suited to wield a weapon of raw psychic force. The space around it warped like stacked lines. the Xenos pushed its borrowed form to the limit. Bones screamed, muscles dissolved, fluids oozed from its skin. The lion admitted this was a dangerous opponent. He had withstood several of its attacks, but it was not enough. He slashed. He severed an arm, watching it drift as if underwater. When the blade came again, the Xenos sneered. It had prepared a trap. Lionel Johnson tried to withdraw his long power sword, but it was too late. Warp weapons were unstable. Lady Hera's relics were infamous. And when the Xenos poured psychic power into its blade, the weapon detonated. A shockwave threw the lion backward. "You are mine now," the Xenos cackled. A voice answered from the darkness. Conrad Kurze stepped from the shadows, a pale smile cutting his face. The Xenos looked at him with terror. Something had reached into the Xenos' mental world. No, had the Xenos entered Kurze's mind? The scene fractured. "Conrad Kurze!" The lion cried out, anguish and fury warring in his tone. Volume 1, Chapter 78, Lion L. Johnson. Shadows, nothing but shadows. The Xenos panicked. It had never seen a mind such as this. "Ha, Primarch, your martial skill, your genetic might mean nothing here. Here I am master!" It screamed. Conrad Kurze did not reply. No answer came, only broken, echoing sounds that unnerved the Xenos. Something moved in the dark, unseen hands closed, an invisible grip at its throat. The Xenos' eyes bulged as it thrashed, impotent. Kurze smiled, bare and grim. Psychic daggers struck him, and he did not flinch. The creature realized this was not simply the Primarch. The darkness had become a host. As countless hands reached out, twisted faces rose from the void. "Let me count your sins," Kurze intoned. Through the Xenos' mental landscape, Kurze traced a network of thought, firefly lines twisting into a nebula, each mote an echo of a ship. Among them were Baroque imperial warships and alien void ships of eras long dead, some shapes belonging to species humanity had met, some to species never before seen. Farther still were black, slender vessels. Kurze followed them outward and found in the mind's distance the homeworld of this entity. "A world," he breathed. "I see you," the chorus in that mental web whispered. "We are coming. Now, let me show you your species' prophecy, straight from your mind." Fear bloomed there, thick and sulphurous. Back on the deck, the disturbance subsided. Most of the mortals had fully awakened. Only the lion knew they would need fresh blood soon. He hauled himself to his feet. His heavy armor made the deck tremble. He looked down at the broken Xenos and at Conrad Kurze, slumped but breathing. A body collapsed nearby. The lion watched Kurze's eyes open, the pupils dark, dim, but nonetheless alive. A hint, a spark. "Dead?" someone asked. "Of course, brother," came the quiet reply. The lion said no more. He turned and began to leave. "Lionel Johnson," Conrad Kurze called after him. "What is it?" the lion answered without slowing. "My brother, I have seen their homeworld, a northern frontier world. Their armies are gathering." Kurze rose. Shadows clung to his slender frame like a cloak. There was a sadness there now. Without the nail, without whatever talisman had once steadied him, he had to face visions alone. His mind worked tirelessly, trying to learn how to handle the sudden prophetic flashes and to brace the darkness within as the nail had once done. "Where?" the lion asked. "In my mind. Do you want to see?" Kurze offered, extending his hand. A wicked smile twisted his mouth. The lion was wary. His eyes flicked over Kurze's face and he shook his head. "No, I'll leave it to you." Kurze's grin widened. "The First Legion does not lack for glorious deeds, brother. Yes, you always hand your scraps to your brothers. You and your legion are so great. The whole galaxy needs you, does it not? We all work for Father. Haven't you and Horus enjoyed enough favor?" "Watch your tongue, Conrad Kurze." The lion's blade was already halfway from its sheath. He pointed the tip at Kurze's chest and stared, the question raw in his voice. "Was I wrong?" Kurze stepped forward and collided with the lion's power sword, the force field deactivated, and the tip biting into his armor. The thin sound of metal on ceramite echoed. "I need dark angels," Kurze said softly. "The Night Lords are not built for frontal engagements." "The Ninth Night Company can help you," the lion replied. He heard footsteps, then more custodes closing ranks. He retracted his long blade, eyes lingering on Kurze for a moment. "The 12th Legion is no less than the 1st, he said. He had seen the ferocity of those fighters. Under Angron's leadership, they could be even more formidable. "Why?" Kurze sneered. "Because they're poor. Poorer than the Night Lords." Conrad Kurze watched the custodes surging toward them, shadows in polished gold, and the exchange hung between them like a blade. That settles it. Don't forget there's still an alien mastermind in the engine room. The lion turned to his sons and saw Conrad Kurz already swallowed by the shadows. Damn it, he swore. He began to shout orders toward the engine room, then stopped when another voice, sly and mocking, slipped into the chamber. Angron and his nail have already gone to deal with it. When Conrad's voice rang out again, the lion understood the trick. Kurz had only wanted to see panic cross his face. Rage flared across the Primarchs' features. Elsewhere, Angron was studying the data the butcher's nails had scraped from the First Legion. He had known the First were wealthy, but the compiled figures left him stunned. Gel, pushing Angron's wheelchair from behind, had fitted Terminator armor that seemed oversized and absurdly immaculate against the threadbare standards of the Warhounds. Looking at those ledgers and the display of wealth, Angron finally understood what the nails meant when it constantly complained of poverty. By comparison, the 12th Legion were abject beggars. The butcher's nails, Angron thought, had more taste for truth than for trade. Sell them? He muttered. I'd sell my redemption before I sold the butcher's nails. Varys and Fel Zeros took their places at his flanks. The air around them chilled. No need to hide, Angron said flatly. From the gloom, an alien stepped forward. When Irelie emerged, everyone stiffened at her voice, sharp, confident, not human. You are not the lion, she declared. The shout cut like a blade through the room. Who are you? Someone demanded. Irelie smiled, a savage improvisation. Kill him, children, tear him apart and throw him out into the void. Angron let the outrage show only as much as his face allowed. Quietly, he watched the combat footage playing on the screens, the duel between the lion and Conrad. Khorne snarled a single, furious oath and surged forward. Irelie's contempt was instant. Just fodder. She reached for Khorne's mind like a thief. The howl of a butcher-blooded warrior met the alien's reach as though trying to crash a door against a wave. Khorne's battle axe was already a blur. Voices, alien, invasive, flooded his skull, trying to unearth the rage and turn it inside out. Garbled, flickering symbols flooded his visor. The psychic shock blurred the battlefield into noise. Khorne bared his teeth. Varys, do your job, he roared. The Sons of Angron closed, and Irelie tightened her lips as Khorne bore down. She dodged his cleaving strike and moved to fling him aside with a palm of force. Two human psychers, Varys and Zarost, interposed themselves, their will a wall. Irelie's expression soured. These were trickier than the Dark Angels had been. Khorne thunked a bolter from his hip and opened fire. The shells screamed, struck what should have been a shield, then warped, ricocheted, became meaningless arcs of light. The bullets were a distraction. The real assassin emerged from the dark. Sevatar slipped forward, chain-glaive spinning, aiming straight for Irelie's throat. Irelie turned and let loose a blast of raw psychic power. Sevatar slammed back into the bulkhead, metal groaning and sparks slashing off his ceramite. A second figure, bearing lightning claws and the black brutality of the Night Lords, shuddered from the impact and cursed. With the psionic wall held by Varys and Zarost, Khorne found purchase. He slammed his boot into Irelie's torso with superhuman force. The alien's human-like body exploded like a struck instrument, bones crunched and flesh sheared under the blow. She skidded into the nearest wall, half her form already unrecognizable. Khorne leapt, drew a dagger, and drove it into her skull. For a breath he allowed himself the word he always had for enemies: trash. Then everything changed. A massive force grabbed him, not around his body, but burrowing into his head. An alien voice roared inside his skull. The nail's voice cried of possession. The psychic tendrils tried to sink roots into his mind. Now you are mine, the voice promised, or threatened. You cannot fight me. Khorne fought back with the only thing he had always trusted. I am a son of Angron, he howled inwardly. Do you think you can corrupt me? His nerves screamed. He strained, trying to tear the invasive threads out of his thoughts. The alien pressure only increased. Gel. Angron's voice was an observation as much as a command. He looked down at his scion convulsing on the deck and called without heat. Gel pushed the wheelchair forward until they stood directly over Khorne. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, Angron rose from the seat. Vertebrae cracked and popped as his massive frame straightened. He reached out, and from his spine a crown of data tendrils erupted like living filaments, sinking into the base of Khorne's skull. Nail, Angron said to the implant lodged somewhere in the ruins of Khorne's physiology. Find the homeworld of this species. Then we will repay them in kind. His hand steadied on Khorne's head as if to soothe the child. Inside the psychic realm, the tide turned. Khorne was dragged through memory, his infancy and boyhood on Terra, scenes of rage and forging, and the brutal lessons of the nails. The alien probed each image, hunting for a wedge. You are doomed, alien, Khorne's mind snarled at the invader, just like every other Xeno that stood before the Imperium. You were saved by the Imperium, a voice hissed back, not pitying, but bitter. How old were you when they caged you and took your family? The alien's own memories tried to obfuscate, to rewrite the deed of salvation into a wound of betrayal. Irely shrieked inside the psychic space and prepared to tighten her grip. Then a bright point of light opened above the mental arena. Out of it poured a cascade of Angron mass production visions, armies of butchering warriors, turning Irely's prison into a gladiatorial arena. The alien's dominance faltered as Angron's will shoved in between. Angron drew Khorne back out of the psychic struggle. Well done, lad, he rumbled. Khorne lifted his head under that praise with fierce, stubborn pride, chest heaving. The system AI inhabiting a nearby host ghosted into visible form beside him, scanning the warrior's mind and giving an offhand report, not corrupted. The relief was palpable. Irely, still lying in pieces, spat the last of her venom. Killing me was child's play. You only killed one body. I will return, within another, in someone new, perhaps in you. Perhaps, her voice faltered as she pointed at the AI, perhaps within that thing. She reached toward the system intelligence, trying to read its architecture. But the AI's inner life was blank to her. Its thoughts refused to open. Before the AI could answer, a huge hand closed around its face and slammed it into the deck. The impact rang. A voice, low and demanding, cut the air. Let me see what you are hiding. Section 53 System AI tasted something through Irely's psychic network. Conrad Kurze? Well done! Hey, came a voice, sharp, amused. You too, brother, another answered. System AI laughed, a dry, metallic sound. Of course, my brother. I never mind. Angron frowned, thinking of the First Legion's strength. A dark weight settled on him. Somewhere in the back of his mind, an image from the past whispered. When the Golden Throne fell, when Terra was shattered and the sun no longer burned, when the galaxy was overwhelmed by the will of the great ocean, humanity's end seemed certain. Among the stars, human fate looked like dust, but the Emperor of mankind, in his last flicker of the human heart before becoming a god, had refused that sentence. Since the universe denied humanity a future, he would make the universe itself a funeral pyre for humankind, sacrificing himself to call forth an alien existence that would unmake a world that would not let humanity live or die. Angron felt that dark counsel like an accusation aimed at him. So, this is why you make me replace you? He muttered to the shattered golden throne he had glimpsed in the warp. News arrived like a blade through the ship's calm. Tribune Kyla's astropathic choir had relayed intelligence from Nuceria. The planet had rebelled. Angron felt his head heat, the rage building into a furnace behind his eyes. Nuceria has rebelled, and Unimus is missing, the message said. When Angron read it aloud, the bridge felt the blast of his fury. The sons of Angron stiffened. Khorne let out a roar that echoed in the alloyed bones of the ship. How dare they? He snarled. Gel and Varys exchanged grim looks. The rebellion had supposedly been suppressed, but Unimus, Angron's adopted father and the man who had held Nuceria, was gone. How did they do it? Someone demanded. Angron pictured the parasites and secret conspirators that always crawled beneath the skin of a world once the legions moved on. We don't know yet, System AI said, feeling the heat of Angron's wrath, but we have cause to go back. The lion's voice cut in through a comlink, cool and immediate. What is it? My world has revolted. I must lead my fleet back, Angron replied, grim. The lion studied the planet through the viewport. Leave it to Conrad Kurze and me. I will speak with father. What can the First Legion do for you? Angron interrupted, declining. This was Nuceria's own wound. He would not make it their matter if it could be spared. The lion hesitated, then conceded. Very well. Nuceria, southern jungle. Unimus woke to chains and a blinding white light. Memory returned in fragments. Nuceria had prospered under imperial favor. Taxes had been lifted, trade routes opened. The small governor had rebuilt schools, clinics, and armories according to a plan left by the butcher's nails before they departed. He had done it for his people. Then the day of the itinerant merchants, traders from other systems arrived, and the ambush struck. Xenos, hidden elites, and human conspirators had erupted in blood. The warhounds who remained on Nuceria had fought bravely, but the attackers had not only soldiers, they had sorcerers. Tribune Kyla had reached the conference chamber to find only lingering psychic residue and a dead itinerant merchant slumped in his chair. "This is a Xenos," he had said, and called for the librarians to track them. And then the alarm. Nuceria had risen. Eunomus had been dragged to a cell, lashed to a table. He bellowed and tried to wrench the bonds, but the steel held like fate. "This is not Nuceria's end." His voice was raw, high Gothic, pleading as much as threatening. Around him moved men in imperial dress who were not what they seemed. He had never expected traitors among the administratum's envoys. He had looked outward, neglected the seeds planted close to his heart. One of them smiled like a scalpel. "I will hang you in the Deschia arena," the man said. Eunomus spat. "You will pay." He tried again to break free. The man shook his head. "The prophecies of the Great Ones do not lie, at least not now. We are particularly interested in that device on Angron's head. The butcher's nails. Are they all like that?" At the mention of the nails, Eunomus's instinct tightened. Two Xenos produced an ancient instrument, metal and nightmare, and Eunomus recognized it immediately, the butcher's nails. Panic and fury fought behind his eyes. "Kill me," he cried. "If you have the courage, kill me." "If you won't die quietly, you will regret it," another sneered. "We will find Angron and tear him apart." They laughed and debated their plans. One called himself part of a cult. "If you are still sane, tell Prince Angron I said hello," Eunomus hissed, though his lungs burned. The butcher's nails descended. The room filled with the staccato whir of machines and Eunomus's tortured screams. Meanwhile, the conspirators gathered the hidden elite, rats in the shadows, and promised them power if they would rise now and throw off imperial rule. "Angron is 1,000 miles away," said the cult spy. "When he returns, he will bargain. We will stand by you." Lies, all of them. Useful lies for pawns who wanted to believe. The spy watched his work and decided to leave. His calculations said his time had run short. He left the planet on a small craft, believing himself clever. The cockpit was empty and silent as he climbed in. A dark figure moved, no helmet, but a deep blue ceramite and a grin like a razor. "Where is Eunomus?" a voice demanded, cold as a void. The spy tried to flee, slamming into the ceramite and finding himself face to face with the Night Lords. He stammered, raised a trembling finger. The Night Lords laughed, a horrible, scornful sound. Brave mortal, they thought. The spy's courage dissolved. The Night Lords took their prize and left without a backward glance. Back aboard Angron's ship, intelligence kept coming. Countless reports poured in from Nuceria, contradictory, fevered, raw with panic. No one on the bridge suggested abandoning the Ghoul Stars. The Night Lords and the Dark Angels could handle the Xenos threat there. Angron had not slept for days. His eyes were red-rimmed, raw from sleeplessness and rage. He stood on the deck, scanning each incoming feed as if his gaze could burn answers from the data. "You should sleep, Angron," System AI said quietly. "Even a Primarch needs rest." Angron did not answer. The fires inside him burned too bright to allow for sleep. He would go home and reclaim what had been stolen, and when he had Eunomus back, if he could, he would make those responsible show the same terror they had given his adopted father. "I cannot sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see Eunomus questioning me." "All right." The System AI fell silent and did not try to argue further. It, too, wanted to know exactly what had happened on Nuceria. That night, Angron made his way to the Triumphal Hall and sat on one of the lower steps. The Redeemer Guard clustered around him. The sons of Angron watched their Gene-Father with worried faces. Everyone knew the place Eunomus held in his heart. "Children." Angron's voice was raw with weariness. He fought to keep his emotions from spilling over to the warhounds, but sorrow hung thick in the air and could not be chased away. As more sons gathered, he sighed. "No need to comfort me." "This isn't comfort, sire," Jel said softly, looking at Angron on the steps. The Triumphal Hall had always been the 12th Legion's sanctuary of glory. Veterans who had fought since Terra and nameless newcomers alike remembered the history forged inside its walls, the torn banners of defeated foes hanging as testament from the unification of Terra to the day Angron had returned. Gel's voice wavered with grief as he addressed the Primarch. "My lord, we are the Warhounds. We are your redemption guard. You said you wanted us to be the hounds of humanity, to be redeemers," Gel continued, eyes on Angron. "But my father, how can we redeem you?" Angron's brow twitched. The butcher's nails at his temples pulsed faintly. "I don't need redemption." "You do, my lord." Khorne stepped forward. He had always been outspoken, sometimes obsequious, but always loyal. "Look at you, Highness Angron. You are broken." "How could we not worry?" Khorne went on. "You are the pillar of the 12th Legion. You are our direction." His voice broke with sincerity. The Angron before them was not the exuberant warrior they had once known. Wariness had carved itself onto his face, and his sons felt the hurt keenly. "Gather round, children." Angron's voice dropped, but everyone heard it. Gel shouted, and the armored veterans closed ranks and sat before him. Angron shed the white robe he had been wearing, extended a finger, and began to tell them about the gladiatorial pits of Nuceria, the fights he had waged, the gladiators who had died at his side, Unimus's lessons in the cave. The sons listened, rapt. By the time he finished, they felt their blood bound to his again. "Undeniably, you are my sons." Angron smacked his lips. "But have you ever thought I have never treated you as mere scions?" A murmur ran through them. "We are kin and brothers," Gel said. "We fight side by side." "It is our honor to be your scions, Highness Angron," Gel added, earnest. Angron's gaze swept over him, and a weak smile touched his lips. He looked at each of his scions. They could all feel the sincerity. He reached for something small beside him. "May I? The nail?" Another ancient and backward ritual. "I don't approve, nor do I disapprove." The system AI's voice ticked in his head as it processed data and juggled the 8th Legion's affairs in return for access to Conrad Kurz's machine body resources. A servitor appeared and fetched a small box from Angron's quarters, Nucerian dye. It wove through the assembled sons, delivered the box to Angron. He opened it, dipped a finger into the dark red stain, and looked at Gel. "Kneel, my commander." Gel dropped to his knees with a heavy thud. Angron pressed his finger to Gel's brow and traced a mark. "This is a ritual of the Unimus tribe, one true warriors may perform. I have seen your valor." He glanced down at the butcher's nail embedded in his own head and gave a short, wry grin. "The nail says this is superstitious. No, this is a bond between your Highness Angron and us." Khorne stepped forward. Angron flashed a mischievous smile. "The Legion co-lord told me to tell you to go to the armory and polish your weapons." Khorne's face went pale. He looked around, mortified. Then Angron laughed. "Ha! Just kidding, my loyal officer." He rapped Gel and motioned him up. "Come here, Khorne. Your turn." Khorne dropped to his knees as well. "One good news and one bad news." The system AI's thought arrived then. "Although I don't know why the Night Lords are on Nuceria, they found Unimus." Angron's breathing eased briefly on that news. "But he has butcher's nails in his head." The second thought followed. Angron's face hardened for a fraction of a second. Then his finger moved and drew a large, perfect circle on Khorne's face with the red dye. Khorne stared, bewildered, at the arc now painted across his features. The rest of the sons blinked in stunned silence. For a moment, nobody understood what had happened. "Can he be saved?" Angron asked the system AI. "Let's try. I think it's possible." The AI glanced at the smeared red on Khorne. Quite ugly. "All right, next." Khorne attempted to plead. "My lord, would do it again?" "Sorry, child. The ritual is only performed once," Angron said, but a smile tugged at his mouth. "That circle suits you. It has style." Khorne slunk away like a scapegoat, the others laughing and jabbing at him good-naturedly. Gel embraced him. "It suits you, Khorne." "Get off, Gel." Khorne swatted him away with mock annoyance, his embarrassment dissolving into laughter. Angron's laugh rang out too, and the hall filled with it. For the first time in days, the warhounds felt a looseness in their chests. They clustered, joked, and for a while the weight on Angron's shoulders felt lighter. Nuceria itself had changed. A space fortress under construction wheeled in orbit above the red planet. Cities rose across the surface. Purposeful structures cut through the plains. The great Primarch had returned to his homeworld, but the welcome had been muted. The planetary governor's purge had left no room for public fanfare. Those who had plotted against the government had been rooted out and brought to light. In that chaotic cleansing, the Nostromo people had aided Nuceria more than anyone could see. On the landing pad, Angron was met by Oedipus, Yochuka, Big Idiot, 2 Night Lords, and other warhounds who had remained on the planet. When he stepped from the blue and white Stormbird, he smiled. "Oedipus," he greeted. "Sire!" Oedipus strode forward and fell into Angron's embrace. Angron squeezed him and murmured, "I'm sorry, I failed." Oedipus's eyes were full of grief as he answered in kind. Unimus's fate had cut him too, but Angron patted his shoulder. "It's all right, Oedipus. I'm back to handle it." His gaze landed on Yochuka, the youngest of the gladiators, whose bulk now marked him as a member of the 12th Legion. "Well done, Yochuka," Angron said, clapping the man on the shoulder. Before Yochuka could reply, Big Idiot barreled forward and wrapped Angron in a crushing embrace. Angron's superhuman nose flared. Big Idiot had clearly not spared himself a proper bath, and a wave of rank body odor hit him. Khorne started forward, hand raised in instinctive reprimand at such a brutish breach of decorum, but Gel shook his head. Angron had smelled far worse things than this in his life. For reasons he could not explain, in that moment he found the smell oddly comforting. "All right, let go of me, you big idiot!" Angron had no patience for pleasantries. His only concern was Unimus. He swept his gaze over the 2 Night Lords who stood ramrod straight before him. "I don't recall Conrad Kurz ascending you." One of them stammered out, "Great Angron, your highness," as if that would smooth things over. Angron's eyes narrowed. He didn't believe whatever lie they were trying to sell. "No matter. Thank you for whatever aid you've given Nuceria. I will inform Conrad Kurz of your merits. I hear you've captured a spy?" "Yes," the Night Lord replied, pointing. "Take a look." They brought him forward like a grotesque exhibit. The cult spy was a ruin of a man, sliced open in places that should not have been sliced, yet astonishingly still alive. His brain and nerves were visible, preserved and suspended in a jar of fluid, and delicate metallic implants, braided like cable, grew from his skull. He breathed, and when he tried to speak, it was a strangled, half-coherent noise that somehow carried a dark levity. "Is he alive?" Angron asked, incredulous. "Alive enough," the Night Lord said. "He talks, he breathes, he jokes." "Kill me," the spy croaked at one point, laughing through the pain. "Kill me, I told you everything, kill me." Then, incoherent again, he whispered something that sounded like the word nail. System AI chimed in, calm and clinical. "This subject's emotional state is unstable. He appears insane, but his self-preservation remains intact. He is a professionally trained operative. He is hiding something." Data tendrils probed the wounded man's mind. Despite the mutilation and psychosis, the scans showed organized thought and unmistakably traces of modified psych signatures. Whoever had handled this agent had been a psychic master. That level of masking would fool most, but not System AI. "You're right," the machine concluded. "He's concealing information." "Your Highness Angron is wise," the Night Lord said, bowing obsequiously. Angron turned and called for Galen, his chief apothecary. Galen appeared from the crowd, the red ritual cross painted on his face. "My lord," he said. "I'm leaving Varus with you, my chief apothecary," Angron said. "Work with these Night Lords and see what he's hiding. Extract every scrap, even if it's about how many times he used the latrine yesterday." The Night Lords opened their mouths to protest at the barb, but Angron had made the command. Galen produced instruments and slender, brightly colored needles that glinted in the light. "Oedipus, bring him to me." Oedipus led the ruined spy forward. Angron watched him closely, and his mood shifted. He knew what it meant to live with a butcher's nail in your skull. He knew how the thing could turn men into beasts. He also knew the opposite, that not every nail made its bearer a monster. He remembered Unimus's old words. No one actually wanted to die, not even those who had gone mad. Angron turned his head and touched the nail driven into his own skull, feeling the heat of it like a second heartbeat. The machine voice of System AI came through, dry and teasing. "Angron Unit 2, you worry too much. Who am I? I am your pilot. I am the lord of the butcher's nails. Relax." Angron gave the nail a restless prod. "Can you do something? Lower its temperature? Calm it?" "Processing," System AI replied. A beat of silence, then, I've already sent Gel to requisition the tools we require. They arrived at the planetary governor's chamber to the sound of shouting. Unimos lay on a bed, the implants on his head woven like electronic braids, hammered into his skull while he had been conscious. Angron didn't want to think about what that had cost the man. Unimos's face twitched constantly. His muscles spasmed, veins rising and popping at his temples. He looked like a beast barely held in check. Unimos, Angron breathed. For a moment the man only stared with animal fury, the muscles in his arms swelling with tension. Then, as if finally seeing the child he had raised, something like recognition and despair flooded his expression. Tears streaked blood from the corners of his eyes. Angron, Unimos rasped. His voice was a thing pulled from the verge of a scream. Pain and raw nerves hummed under his skin like high-tension lines, ready to explode. He begged Oedipus, begged to be thrown into the arena so he could die gloriously battling the Xenos. Oedipus had refused. Unimos had ripped at the attendant who had steadied him, blood and small teeth spattering Angron's arm. "Kill me," he howled. Blood foamed around his lips. "You are not my son. You were picked up. Angron, let me die like a warrior." Angron tried to hold him down, to get through to him. "I will save you, Unimos," he said, voice raw. "You can't save me." Unimos spat back. "The nail." System AI's voice cut through, crisp and businesslike. "Do not panic. I've dispatched Gel and others to retrieve the appropriate instruments. We need specialized tools." Angron watched as System AI's tendrils, thin, precise filaments of data, probing into Unimos's skull, pulling at interfaces and reading every signal. The apothecarial instruments from the Legion were laid out, and Galen assisted as best he could, but when System AI began the painstaking work of separating the implants from living tissue, it became clear this was no routine extraction. "Why didn't you remove it earlier?" Angron asked, staring at Unimos's contorted face. Unimos's answer came weak and embarrassed. I forgot." System AI made a small, amused sound, an infuriatingly human hum. "You can forget something like that? Huh." It then rebuked Angron lightly. "I don't have a foolish son like you." The machine's tendrils worked with surgical patience, but an hour slipped away and the mood hardened. System AI's tone changed. "Bad news." "Speak," Angron demanded. "I cannot peel this butcher's nail out," System AI said flatly. "It is embedded far deeper than yours. It is fused not only to cerebral tissue, but is integrated with his cervical spine. To extract it now would destroy the neural pathways. He would be crippled. He has already lost an arm." Angron felt the floor tilt beneath him. Images from 100 battles, 100 griefs, pressed in. "Then, you have a choice," System AI said without softness. Angron stared down at the man who had taught him, who had raised him from a lost child to something approaching a man. Unimos's chest heaved, his breaths like distant foghorns. Angron thought of the arena, of blood and steel and spectators roaring for glorious ends. He thought of the dignity Unimos had begged for in a fit of delirium. "I will not let him linger a cripple," Angron said finally, voice low and terrible. "If he cannot live as a man of Nuceria, he will die as one of its warriors." "I will kill him myself," he declared, and the words were not delivered in haste but with the slow, iron certainty of a sentence carried out. "He will die in the Deschia arena before all the people of Nuceria. He will die on the land he loved." System AI felt Angron's tiny, stubborn tears tracking down his face. Its diagnostic threads flickered. "There must be a fault." "What did you say?" it asked. "I don't want to repeat it again, this hatred," Angron whispered. "It's engraved in my heart." He closed his eyes. System AI withdrew its data tendrils. "I'll electrocute you," it muttered. "Ah!" Inside the medical bay, Angron was thrashing on the floor, overturning equipment. He didn't understand why the butcher's nails were so angry. To him, he hadn't done anything wrong. A door slammed open. Khorne and Gel entered, weapons ready, and froze at the sight of Angron rolling on the floor. They exchanged a look. "Varys, there's no Xenos here," someone called. "Search the next area, Khorne," another voice ordered. Khorne nodded and closed the door. Angron sank to his knees and motioned them in. "Come in," he said. Khorne and Gel obliged, half squatting on the chairs meant for human mortals. At first, they had thought Angron and Unimos were fighting. Instead, it was the Legion co-lord disciplining Angron. "Find a place to sit," the co-lord said. Angron pointed to 2 chairs. Khorne and Gel settled themselves, more squat than seat. System AI presented two options. First, remove the butcher's nails, then place him in a stasis field and wait for technology to advance enough to cure him. Second, add modules to him, and then those butcher's nails might become like me. Second, Angron answered without hesitation. For nearly half a month, Angron and System AI stayed in the medical bay. Most of the physical modifications were done. The most important step left was inserting a pilot. System AI was ready. You should speak with your scion. I think he will agree. Angron looked toward the two figures who had been watching, Khorne and Gel, then nodded slowly. Go rest, he told them. They obeyed and left. Even an imperial demigod was exhausted by the mental strain. Angron returned to his room and closed his eyes. He slipped into a dream. He should have died. He should have fallen in battle against the Xenos. His sacrifice had felt meaningless. He should have been at the Primarch's side. Instead, a warrior's honor and duty had driven him on, for humanity and the Imperium. He stared blankly at mass-produced Angron models wandering in the distance. Father! He cried. He approached one of the manufactured Angrons and knelt before it, confessing in the arena of Dashia. Tears rose and faded. He spoke of small victories, asked after his brothers, how he longed to stand on the soil again and cut down Xenos for his gene-father and the Emperor. The mass-produced Angron regarded him for a long moment, then handed him an axe. He took it, dazed, and the model struck him. He fell and was hauled up only to be punched again. Stars flashed before his eyes, and he thought he saw his gene-father, Angron himself. My lord, he roared. Keep it down, another voice snapped. A green figure appeared beside Angron. It was not human. The dream Dionysus stiffened. Xeno, you're trying to corrupt me. Wishful thinking, the other replied. System AI couldn't resist and kicked Dionysus in that mental space. Here the AI was half-master. Dionysus, Angron said soberly as he looked at his scion. Dionysus lifted his head from the ground. You've worked hard, my child. Angron held out his hand. Get out, Xeno. You will not use the image of our gene-father to deceive me. When I wake, I will tear you apart. Dionysus slapped Angron's hand away. Angron's eyelids twitched. His initial sadness dissolved into the hard circuitry of his scion. System AI barked. You're dead, Dionysus. Bullshit, the apparition spat. Don't even think of corrupting me, Xeno. System AI clenched its fist as it watched the stubborn specter. Angron stepped protectively between them. Brother, he might not be very clear-headed. These brats are spoiled by you, you scoundrel, System AI snarled. Mass-produced Angron, beat him for me, one of the mass-produced Angrons charged. Angron gave Dionysus a look that said good luck and braced himself. The simulation unfolded. The phantom was beaten. When the bruised, swollen Dionysus sat near an imaginary campfire, the truth sank in. He was dead. Only through the intervention of the Legion Co-Lord and the Butcher's Nails could he continue to exist in this form. Angron sighed. The sound was almost a laugh. My lord, is this Valhalla? Dionysus asked, covering his face. If it were Valhalla, why would it hurt to be struck? You are now a string of data, Angron said quietly. This is my mental world. I know, System AI interjected, and I need you, Dionysus. At Angron's words, Dionysus brightened. Even in death, he could still serve his gene-father. For Lord Angron, I would die 10,000 deaths without regret. You are already dead, System AI reminded him. Dionysus bowed his head. I want to enter a butcher's nail. My mentor Unimus fell victim to a xenoplot implanted with the nails. As a Legion veteran, you've seen them. As you wish, Angron replied. There was no complaint in Dionysus. For humanity and for his gene-father, he would sacrifice everything, even his remaining semblance of a soul. I'm sorry, my child. I failed to save you, Angron said, patting him on the shoulder. Dionysus said nothing, looking directly at his father. Can I still see you? Can I come here? Theoretically, yes. Practically, I have already granted you the authority, son of Angron. You have much to learn. As the first, your task will be arduous. I accept any difficulty or obstacle the Legion Co-Lord sets, Dionysus replied. System AI smiled inwardly. He clapped, and countless packets of data unfolded into documents, stacks of instructions appearing before Dionysus. The ghost looked overwhelmed. Perhaps he had spoken too eagerly. You are about to enter the mind of the Nuceria governor, System AI informed him. Daily official duties will be your routine. Additionally, I will teach you to use your cockpit correctly. You must master every module. cell stimulation, psychic detection, shield adjustment, data attacks. This will be a long lesson. You will also learn to observe the weather and how to stand up and fight after the body loses consciousness. Angron listened to every word. Only now did he fully appreciate what System AI had done for him. Nail, thank you, he said, genuine gratitude in his voice. Honestly, instead of thanking me, can't you train your abilities? System AI grumbled. Angron looked up at the ceiling, then closed his eyes. Some time later, Unimus came out of his stupor. He stared at the ceiling, then instinctively touched the butcher's nails driven into his head. They were still there. Nervous, he looked around the medical bay. Angron sat by his bedside, reading a book of poetry. Angron, get away from me! Unimus shrieked, terrified at the thought of becoming a blood-crazed thing in front of his Primarch. A calm voice, soft and oddly formal, answered from somewhere between machine and mind. Hello, esteemed Master Angron. I am Dionysus. A voice sounded in Unimus's head. He looked toward Angron with a nervous, almost childlike expression. Do not be afraid, Master, the voice said. Those are my scions. Angron, remembering how he had felt the first time the nail had taken hold of him, watched Unimus with a puzzled, almost tender look. Unimus blinked, gathering himself. Angron, what have you done to me? He asked. Angron rose from the chair, crossed the room, and wrapped the smaller man in a heavy and awkward embrace. Unimus braced himself on his elbows. The pain radiating from his mouth into his cranial nerves made his teeth ache. Dionysus moved to help. He followed the procedures the System AI had taught him, using whatever data he now possessed to ease Unimus's pain. Ah! Unimus cried softly as a numbing impulse ran through him. He convulsed. Angron's expression tightened. The nail, he muttered. A sharp, irritable voice, part apology, part scolding, snapped in Unimus's mind. Not here. This is electrocution. Damn it. What kind of idiot are you? I taught you hundreds of times, Unimus winced. I'm sorry, Master. This scion of mine isn't yet familiar with how to control the butcher's nails. Unimus met Angron's eyes, and after a long moment, let out a thin laugh. It's fine. This is so much better than before. Angron cocked his head. What name does this child inside my head bear? Dionysus, came the answer, steadier now. Angron smiled faintly. Then we will need to learn each other's rhythms. I hope these old bones can keep up. Unimus grinned despite the lingering pain. Master. Enough. Angron held up a hand. Rest now. I have much to attend to. Unimus blinked and Angron nodded once. When he left, Unimus lay weakly on the sickbed and stared at the ceiling. Child, he asked slowly, what are you capable of? Dionysus's voice was faint. Perhaps I can help you with official duties. He sounded uncertain. Being a former human, now reduced to a mass of data, made some habits and the language of command hard to regain. It was raining on Nuceria. Angron strode down the broad boulevard flanked by his scions and a line of mortal troops. His face was set. The last month had been wasted on cleaning the butcher's nails from his master's head, time that could have been spent on conquest. An envoy from the Emperor of Mankind had come seeking audience, but System AI had sent him away. A custodian had departed Nuceria, bearing the curt note that I am currently saving humanity, and had taken the Sisters of Silence recovered by the Warhounds with him. Oedipus waited at the door of the interrogation chamber. When Angron and the Redemption Guard arrived, he rendered a crisp Legion salute. One thing the 12th Legion had that many others lacked was unity between the Nucerian-born recruits and the Terran veterans. Gel acknowledged the salute with a slight nod. Oedipus opened the door. How are Galan and the others? Angron asked. Still the same rhetoric, Oedipus replied, unease in his eyes. Lord Varys delved into the traitor's inner sanctum, but the results are poor. Fragmented memories tell us the cult is a Xenos organization, founded by Xenos. A hush fell. Oedipus's face grew even more troubled. They have tried to assassinate the Emperor and your brothers before. More than once. Now they have their eyes set on you, Highness Angron. Angron's stride faltered for the briefest moment. I suspect some within the Imperium are not to be trusted, Oedipus added, voice low. The sons of Angron bristled at the blasphemous suggestion. No one answered. Gel and Khorne watched their lord carefully, knowing full well that a single command from him could have the insolent officer brought down. Angron's voice cut the tension. Watch your words, Oedipus. We fight side by side, but that does not give you license for madness here. He turned his head to his scions. Forget those words. I heard nothing, Khorne muttered from the side. Gel gave a small, conciliatory nod. Angron's judgment was as broad and blunt as ever. If the Imperium carries vermin, that is not ours to root out by reflex. The Emperor will know what to do. He looked back at Oedipus. Go and rest. Oedipus bowed and left. As the group resumed their march, Gel spoke up, voice tight with concern. Though the warhounds respect the Nucerian-born, such blasphemy. He is correct, Angron said simply. They walked through a long corridor. Angron spoke as they went, voice low and fierce. Xenos corruption is everywhere. Not only Xenos, that unspeakable things spy on the Imperium and on my brothers. Every choice we make from now on could send us into the abyss. The Legion co-lord always warned me, use your brains. Loyalty is not the same as stupidity. Not even the noblest heart is without flaw, and I am no exception. Vigilance is essential. He smiled then, more like a flash of teeth than warmth. Now let us see what our guest has revealed. The interrogation chamber smelled of disinfectant and burnt flesh. Through Angron's eyes, the prisoner was a twisted, gelatinous thing that had once been human. System AI's processes hesitated for an instant. Angron's mouth twitched. He had never expected interrogation could turn a man into a lump of goo. We failed the mission, Gellon said, apology heavy in his tone, as Angron stepped forward. His mind resisted too hard. Mortal, release your mind. Let me peer into it one more time. Varys's face had gone red with the strain as he poured his psychic will at a shattered soul. The nail, a garbled, disgusted voice, snapped through the shared channel. Don't even think about it. This is too disgusting. Fragments of imagery and words flooded the petitioning psyker. Propaganda slogans, a madman's scribbles, an inchoate broadcast. This is outrageous. How dare someone want the pilot to take control personally? Volume 1, Chapter 86, The Conspiracy of the Legion's Nail. We are the sons of Angron. We are the radiant gems. The vision collapsed into nothing. Angron steadied himself. He was used to broken minds and the fragments they shed, but the intrusion hinted at something else. Media, deliberate memetics, or a planted narrative. The spy from the cult is dead, System AI reported flatly. Angron gave a short nod. This was expected news, but he wanted details. Any clues? He handed the notes he had been sorting to a nearby Warhounds trooper. Khorne, impatient, snatched them up first. System AI projected what data it had. A Psyker Master killed that cult spy from 1,000 miles away, came the analysis. They had planted a seed in his soul long ago. Varys is grief-struck. Varys stood silent, fists tight. I tracked that Xenos, System AI continued. It boarded a rogue trader's vessel and fled into the warp. Then it hit a warp storm, another line added. The implication hung heavy in the air. Nuceria sat at the dangerous junction of the Ultima Segmentum and the Segmentum Tempestus. The nearest Primarch worlds, Nocturne above, Macragge below, with Olympia and Barbarous further still, surrounded this crossroads. Angron's mind catalogued names. Vulcan, Perturabo, Gilliman, those he had met, and Mortarion, a name he had heard in passing. The realization spread through his ranks like frost. System AI spoke again. Sharp, there may be star systems hidden within the warp storm surrounding Nuceria. Angron's eyes narrowed. The discovery changed everything. Prepare the fleet, System AI said without ceremony. We have ships to move. What of the Emperor's Great Crusade? Someone murmured, as if on reflex. System AI shrugged off the protocol in its own cold way. How is this not a part of the Great Crusade? Reclaim lost human worlds, strike the Xenos, we merely take a different route. Practically nothing could rouse its priorities more quickly than a new system to be claimed. Orders were given, troops readied. Before they departed, Angron left a detachment of elite warriors to guard Unimus. Fresh blood flowed into the Legion ranks. Sons like Oedipus and Yochuka were folded into the Warhounds. In a quiet chamber, Chief Apothecary Gallon scanned a matrix of files on his data slate. Every record concerned the butcher's nails. Khorne and Gel stood behind him, their faces set. Brothers, Gallon began. This will be our chance to bind ourselves more tightly to His Highness Angron and to the Legion co-lord. Khorne and Gel both saw the image of the butcher's nails reflected in the display and in their own eyes. Does our sovereign know about this? Khorne asked. Gallon glanced toward Gel. As commander of the Legion and Angron's deputy, Gel's position made Galen wonder how truly loyal he was. "How many nails can we manufacture?" he asked instead. Khorne was blunt. "How many can we make?" Galen sighed. The data was incomplete. During the liberation of Nuceria, the Warhounds never tried to mass-produce those torturous implants. Crucial schematics and processes had been lost. "The biggest obstacle isn't the mechanical housings," he said. "It's the internal technology, the reactive layer that interfaces with the brain and the embedded interface template. That's the part we don't have." Khorne's reply was pragmatic. "That's not so different from other augmentation tech. If needed, we could consult the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus for much of the work." Galen nodded. "Angron and I studied the butcher's nails on Master Unimus. They contain a reactive layer that binds and reads neural patterns, and they carry an interface template, essentially the same template as the one that links the Legion Colord to Angron's own head." Gel folded his arms and stared at the model on the table. Would Angron erupt in fury if he discovered his scions were attempting to replicate what was on his skull? Gel reminded himself there were no real secrets aboard the Redemption. The will of the Legion Colord was everywhere. Even a simple servitor could have its productivity doubled on a whim. The Legion Colord would know. Still, Gel listened as Galen continued. "I need your support, Gel Khorne. You are the closest scions to our Primarch. The Butcher's Nails will be the 12th Legion's secret. A secret buried in agony. What would it mean for the low-ranking brothers to learn they would be absorbed into the nails after death? Panic? Or a grim type of honor? How would the Imperium react when it learned the 12th possessed a means to convert souls into data? The 12th's foundation was not as secure as that of the 1st or the 13th Legions. They had not yet earned the fear to oppose the Imperium openly. "Why must it be such a torturous thing?" Gel finally asked. "Because emotion is the fuel of the Legion Colord," Galen answered. "Those implants aren't cruelty for its own sake. They drive men to extremes, rage, grief, ecstasy, and it is those extremes that feed the Colord's power. The souls that return to it bring their emotions with them. That is how the Colord grows. With the Colord's modification of the Butcher's Nails, we will outstrip the 1st Legion," Galen said, eyes bright. "Will be the most disciplined, most deadly instrument in the Emperor's arsenal. Even the Luna Wolves, without counting their material, will not be our match." He sketched out the future. Once the Butcher's Nails were integrated across the Legion, there would be a dramatic increase in battlefield efficiency. Traditional channels could be abandoned in favor of a new neural network created by the nails. The 12th need not rely on vast psychic defenses like the 1st. The returned souls within the Colord could supply guidance and vigilance. From fleet actions to ground assaults, the Warhounds would become the Emperor's finest blade, or perhaps Angron's. Gel and Khorne exchanged a look. Galen had them committed. "Found it!" Angron felt the smile curl his lips as the ship's system cried the discovery. The 13th Expedition Fleet cut free of the warp storm at Mandeville Point and spilled into a dark, uncharted pocket of real space. The convergence lay only days from Nuceria, yet had been an abyss inside the warp, a cluster the Imperium itself had not charted. The Redemption settled into position. The navigator stepped down weakly. He needed rest. Captain Lothara Salin, daughter of a tower, peered at the brown and green world below and began to activate her instruments. But before she could, the Legion Colord had already scanned and cataloged everything. Lothara inhaled, a lurch of envy and fear crossing her features. For a moment she wished she too had the nails, if only to secure her command. System probes streamed data into the Colord. In minutes, the planet was known. It was a night world, a holdover from the old night, stubborn, inward-looking, and uninterested in the wider Imperium. They called it Jadasla. Angron rested on his brass-painted throne and considered two options, military subjugation or diplomacy. The Legion Colord silently counseled for the former. Angron wanted the Warhounds to be more than mere bloodhounds. The Imperium regarded the 12th as murderers and no more. Angron intended to change that. He chose the second option. He had intended to send scions as ambassadors, but the Colord warned against risking Astartes when the situation was unknown. In the end, a single unlucky rogue trader from the ship's retinue was sent down as envoy. News returned fast, and it was bad. The traitor staggered up from the cabin, his mind shattered, the blood and gore of his attendants staining his garb. He could only slump and whisper, uselessly. Angron had already seen the servitor footage. The knights of House Herpetrax had butchered the envoys. They had nailed pieces of human skin to their banners, scrawled with curses against the Imperium and Angron himself. "You knew," Angron said to the nail embedded in his skull. "Naturally, I did not know. I am not a god. I merely guessed," the Legion co-lord replied mildly. Angron's judgment came swift. The alarm screamed. The sons of Angron readied for purge. Meanwhile, the knights of House Herpetrax celebrated their defiance under the stars. Their jubilation ended with the first streaks of fire across the sky. Ash Wolf, the Titan Legion of the 13th Expedition Fleet, awakened its machine gods. The tech priests intoned, Titans trembled to life. Pilots and servitors manned cockpits. Chariots of war were loaded onto shuttles. The lands of Jadasla were tilled by pastoral mechs, servants of a feudal order. They froze at the sight of drop pods. The house's retainers rushed out, crude weapons raised, and the warhounds set beacons and did not look back. Massed artillery hammered the advancing knights before they could close. "Praise the Legion co-lord," a warhound cried as they secured the first beacon. Above, Titan airframes opened, and the first of the Ash Wolf's Warhounds-class machines, Atlan, crashed down, roars and bellows rising with it. Angus, Atlan's pilot, keyed his targeting. Strike initiated. Missiles and lances tore through fields and causeways. The knights, tiny beside towering titans, were shredded. Mortal pilots were flung skyward like corpses in a storm. The ancient fortress gates of House Herpetrax belched smoke and dust as munitions slapped against void shields and detonated. The patriarch of House Herpetrax refused to yield honor. Knights rushed to their frames. Their machine spirits screamed with fear. The sight of a Primarch stepping from a drop pod broke that last stubborn resistance. Drop pods fell at the center of the battlefield. Angron strode from the hatch, unarmored beneath the roar of gods and engines, his honor guard raining bolts into any mortal who reached for a weapon. He walked at the front, a living blade cutting through those who tried to stop him. Around him, the warhounds surged forward, servitors, space marines, titans, merciless and ordered. Where the knights met their missiles, ruin followed. Where a Primarch walked, death followed on his breath. When a knight finally pushed through a torn gateway and stood in the open, Angron stopped. He fixed his gaze on the pilot, on the machine spirit barely contained inside the great frame, and held the look. Section 59. The voice of the butcher's nails thundered in Angron's skull. "Kneel." Under the watchful eyes of the Redemption Guard, the knight shuddered and bowed its plated head. "Angron!" Gel roared, raising his power axe. He and Khorne surged around the machine and wrenched the pilot from the cockpit. The knight's ceramite warped like softened metal beneath their grip. Angron ignored the commotion of his sons. In his mind, the nails intoned that when a world spat back a blasphemy at redemption, it should have known its fate. The planet's defenders fired antiquated ammunition at them, mortal gunsmen firing crude shells from behind the prince. The force field before Angron flickered as the bullets punched through. Calculated by the nails, the trajectory reversed. The rounds glanced back. Angron did not look round. He walked on into the heart of the fortress within a fortress, the royal court, sealed tight as a tortoise shell. Every step he took presaged death for those within. Two knights stepped out on either side of the doorway and raised their weapons clumsily. In the next heartbeat, flaming shells arced through the air and welded each knight to its pilot. Their armored frames fused and melted into molten ruin. Angron stood before the steel gate. He narrowed his eyes. The Redemption Guard clustered at his shoulders. The nails spoke in his head. "What are you waiting for?" "Open the door," Angron answered aloud. "My sons are watching. Show your divine power, Legion co-lord. Brother." The nails hissed now. "This gate is manual. In other words, pure machinery. How simple-minded." Angron's face burned with a fleeting flush. Did his sons think he stood here for show? "Gel, open it," he snapped. He had not finished when a melt-a-gun blast passed so close to the warhounds, their helmets tasted the heat. The gate collapsed with a thunderous crash, revealing a throne room turned to flowing rock. Even Gel, who rarely thought with anything but action, knew this was the doing of the Legion co-lord. He smothered Khorne's mouth with a hand. Khorne had the kind of blunt audacity that deserved nails in his skull, Jell decided, once they were available. Angron walked through the wrecked portal with the expression of a god. Knights stood ready within the court. On the throne sat the leader of House Herpetrax, crowned. Angron's voice, quiet but like a falling guillotine, filled the hall. "Which of you killed my ambassador?" The king on the throne shrank inward, aghast at the magnitude of the Imperium's wrath. Silence fell so complete, only Angron's breathing echoed. A lone knight tried to speak, commander of the Imperium of Man. "This is the world of House Herpetrax, and we do not welcome," another began. Jell did not tolerate the interruption. He closed his hand around the knight's head and lifted it free. The crowd watched, riven with horror, as a skilled warrior who had stood proud moments before was now no more than a boiling stump in Gel's grasp. Angron's breath growled through the hall like distant thunder. Everyone felt as if time itself had ended. No one dared move. "Who killed my envoy?" Angron roared, and fear finally spread like a disease. All eyes went to the throne. Angron smiled, and behind him countless bolters rose and locked their sights on the assembly. He stepped up to the throne and took the crown in his hand. Its jewels flashed, and the hall filled with blood. These people had been corrupted, body and spirit, by noxious doctrines. There were no innocents here. Even with the ruler dead, Angron sensed the lingering malice, the slow spreading of an unseen hand upon humanity. The nails were already thinking beyond the room. "Unit 2, a voice said. "At Angron," another replied. "Angron Unit 2. The nails repeated. "Speak." I recalculated. 3 warp routes run from Nuceria to the Dasla cluster, including the one we slipped through. This place could become our rear base or a chaos rear base. Angron listened. The nails' warning was sensible. Corruption was everywhere. A foothold here could turn on them. The 12th Legion was too small. He needed a line of retreat. Not betrayal, but contingency. "We need our own Adeptus Mechanicus," the nails stated. "Name this star system, Angron Unit 2. "Shadow of Nuceria," Angron decided. "Whatever." The nails replied and immediately began scheming how to extract the machine cult's tech priests. It had no love for fanatics who bowed before the Omnissiah, only for the knowledge in their skulls. A night world without knights. How pathetic. "We can forge our own knights. Our Titan force must have a foothold too." Angron rose. "Destroy this place, children. Destroy the oppressor's castle. Redeem those corrupted lives." "Oh, Angron Unit 2, guess what I found?" The nails sang. "A sorcerer Xenos. His ship was not torn by the warp, but crashed onto a mining world. Perhaps Conrad being here would serve. He would learn fear better than from my sons." "Not likely," Angron bristled. "If he is here, he won't stay, and neither will our other brothers. The 12th Legion is the dread of Xenos." He barked orders. "Jell, have the librarians prepare. Bring Varys. I have found a worthy opponent for him. Let Varys unleash his wrath." Beyond the ruined court, across the writhing lattices of chaos and hidden mysteries of the warp, Anvilcar bent his will. The Psyker, gifted, blasphemous, precisely the sort of mind the nails had hinted at, sat aboard a crippled rogue trader vessel on the mining world. He practiced forbidden calculations and read the future like a black rune. This was still the physical universe. The veil had not yet torn them apart. The crew around him were husks, their wills folded into his. He needed them alive only long enough to get him away from Nuceria. A mechanic, stiff and servile, extended a wrench. "My lord, the engine is torn. I cannot fix it." "You have done as I required," Anvilcar replied with a smile that had the wrong geometry to it. "Now one final gift remains. Add a small present for the Lord of Nuceria." Outside, a stormbird descended from orbit to the planet's surface. The system AI scanned the mining world and reported at Angron's shoulder. No signs of indigenous life remain. Once there was life here, but the long night took them. There are several human installations. They show welcoming signatures. I detect the rogue trader's ship. "Who is aboard?" a librarian asked, psychic energy humming. It replies to my gaze. "Interesting. It has detected me watching. This is another small trap." Angron paused on the ramp, lips twisting in contempt. "Traps. Can't they think of anything new?" Varys at his side looked up. "My lord, we change the tactic. We will kill him with that which he despises most." Angron inclined his head. When the guard reboarded the Stormbird, The rogue trader's ship slowly lifted, then a missile slammed into it. On the deck, Anvilkar's face bent into rage as the vessel he controlled exploded into fire and debris. "These bastards," he hissed, and then the world burned. Anvilkar barked orders and forced his controlled crew to bring the ship's shields up, but it was already too late. Missiles chewed the hull apart, and the vessel blew in a roar of fire. He felt the self-destruct he had set for Angron trigger in the same instant, a cold certainty sliding through his mind like ice. A mechanical voice screamed over the comms, clipped and bitter. "This is not my future." The sound was a spark. Anvilkar's small mouth twisted in a snarl on his oval head as he drove his psychic power outward to its limit. He would not die here. The energy saved him from immediate annihilation, but it did not save him whole. Bolt fire lanced from his left flank. A blue psychic aegis shimmered over him as rounds hammered into it. He howled in high Gothic, watching the dust and flame the explosions had thrown up. Rounds struck the shield without stopping, and Anvilkar teleported several starships to his position, trying to erect a barrier of metal against the storm of return fire. But the librarians had learned, from the Dark Angels and from bitter experience, how to deal with sorcerers. Whenever he tried to cast, a librarian struck from another angle, breaking his concentration and dragging him under a tide of suppression. Shots and psychic countermeasures tore at him from every side. "The power on this Xeno is still very strong," came a shout. "Suppress him. Do not let him release sorcery," someone ordered. Another voice barked. "Where is Varys?" "He's deploying new tactics learned from our cousins," came the reply. Varys moved like a thing born of shadow. He had learned silence from the Night Lords, heels that did not scuff, breath that barely moved. Not a true Night Lord by blood, he was one with their darkness now. He crept through rubble and flame, a ghost between flickers of dying engines. Anvilkar raged at the harassment, at these human warriors who would not fight fair. "Angron, your father deceived you. You will never know the abyss he will drag humanity into," he spat. "Do you think your actions please him? You are disposable, sacrifices to his so-called great cause." His psychic shield shivered and split, but the librarians kept their own defenses intact. They were few compared to some legions, but they were disciplined, and that made the difference. "Xeno," one of them challenged over the roar, "do you think you know more than I do? We are not blood-mad beasts. We are warriors. You will not force me to turn against the Emperor. Humanity is a whole, and the Emperor is its leader. We fight the darkness, and you are part of that darkness. Your end is come." Angron's voice crackled over the Stormbird's comms, contempt like a blade. How, he asked contemptuously, could the Emperor's children be misled by a few words from a Xeno? Anvilkar, furious and proud, could only watch as his attempt to claim the moral high ground disintegrated. He had the chance to speak his name. He clutched for it even as his life bled from him, wanting to tell these honor-claimed warriors of his people's lost glory. But before he could finish, there was a new pain. A thin sound, like bone, being split, a jolt that ran through him and into the hollow of his skull. Psychic energy burst out from close behind him, a clean strike that sprayed his flesh. "Got you, Xeno." Varys' voice cut across the battlefield. Flesh ruptured. Anvilkar's body, half fractured by psychic force, began to fall apart. He had been so wrapped in his memories, in the grandeur of his vanished race, that he had not felt the true danger close at hand. He collapsed, breath shallow, vision blurring. He reached for the name on his tongue. "I." But the words never finished. The butcher's nails in Angron's skull answered with cold efficiency. Tendrils of data, the nails' metaphorical reach, made flesh in the minds of those who carried them, probed Anvilkar's ruins. Countless filaments of information delved into the remaining nerves and thoughts, pulling memory and mind like threads. Anvilkar fought, mustering the last of his psychic reserves, but there was almost nothing left to spend. He could only watch as his people's history, his name, his soul, were reduced to lines of code. Varys watched impassively as the Xeno's body dissipated under the nail's work. The system AI, Angron's internal interlocutor, the nail's voice-given intelligence, spoke then, its tone heavy with more feeling than the Primarch expected. He was the last of his species, it observed. Angron did not know how to comfort a machine that mourned. The nail answered its own melancholy, sharp and sudden. Their world was already destroyed. I still wanted to go to their home and wipe them all out, it said, almost amused by its own ferocity. A beat, and then, in a different register, the nail reported new intelligence. New data has been uploaded, information about the cult, an organization whose goal is to destroy humanity and starve chaos. It suggested handing the material to Malkador to let the old hand decide the best course of action. Angron gave a single slow nod. Do it. He turned his gaze to Varys. Well done. Right, my lord, Varys answered and bowed. When the Xenos matter had been erased and the usable data secured, Angron walked the smoking field. Decayed steel jutted from the earth like the ribs of some dead god. In the center of the wreckage knelt a titan, a divine engine bruised and half-buried, just one monument of the old wars visible through the haze. Further off, beyond the ruined battlements, a factory's lights still flared faintly through moss and vine. Its outlines were clear enough to make a warrior's mouth dry with hunger. Perhaps, Angron thought, smiling in a savage way, there was more here than the carcass of a lost house. Fabrics of human industry, relics of the machine god's past, STC templates, weapons, mechanisms, any of it could bring Mars to Nuceria like wolves to a feast. The nail, always quick to see profit, piped in through the comms. We are going to be rich, it said. Angron's smile widened. He could see the trap, promise an STC, and the Adeptus Mechanicus would crawl here on bloody knees. Whether House Herpetrax had been victors or refugees of that ancient war mattered little. Someone who refused the Imperium had been wiped out, and their remnants were ripe for scavenging. He turned to Varys. Send a communication to Mars. Tell them the 12th Legion has found a brand new STC template. Varys paused, eyebrows lifting. They had not even searched the factory yet. Still, he inclined his head. Lure them here, slaughter them, an old satisfying plan. On it, my lord. Later, in the quiet of a temporary command post, Varys and a librarian ran through the engagement with methodical calm. Jell and Khorne lingered at the edge of the circle. They had combined tactics learned from the Dark Angels with the Night Lord's stealth. The First Legion's methods for dealing with psychers had been particularly useful. What about ordinary warriors? Khorne asked bluntly. Not you librarians, us. How do we deal with these sorcerers? Varys answered without flourish. Conventional ammunition is often useless. We need energy weapons and close combat. Their bodies are fragile under sustained, violent assault. He met Khorne's eye. Exchange psychic energy for plasma pistols, if you must. Hit them hard and stop them from casting. Jell stepped forward and, half in jest, half in challenge, mentioned Jedek, currently on Mars. Should we give him the special privilege of being the Warhound's representative there? The joke hung between them, and to Jedek's surprise, it was taken at face value by a few. On Mars, Jedek walked a muddy lane, the megacity of the Fabricator General looming ahead, towers of glass and steel, fortresses of scaffolding and pipe, the black smoke of endless forge wheels rising into the polluted sky. The constant, metallic thunder of knights and machine monotone filled him like a second heartbeat. He felt small here, and oddly watched. A deep, familiar voice cut into the murk. Cousin. Jedek turned and found rogue traitor Regulus at his side, a Luna wolf who served among the Adeptus Mechanicus. Regulus wore red robes over mechanic augmetics, and beneath the fabric the gears and pistons of a tech marine flashed. He bore the marks of someone comfortable with both aristocratic bargaining and the sanctified tools of Mars. Have you severed your emotions like those masters? Regulus asked, half amused. Somewhat, Jedek replied. I never thought the Warhounds would have someone here on Mars. My sire is pleased at the return of a brother. He's most pleased that His Highness Angron has integrated into the Imperium quickly and has earned praise from many scions of the Empire. It surprises him. Surprised by what? That my sire seeks the Emperor's favor? Regulus asked, eyes narrowing. Jedek's voice dropped. Over the years, something within him had developed a subtle sense for the moods of others. He did not know if it was a shared trait or just a private edge he had sharpened. He kept the feeling to himself. Regulus regarded him and, with a small, contemptuous smile, added one word like a knife. Barbarian.